Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching What If Naruto was saved by Kiritsugu Emiya. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no time, let's start the story.
No. 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 The renowned Magus killer Emiya Kiritsugu could only watch in increasing fear and horror as he watched helplessly as the Holy Grail persisted in taking revenge for his thoughts and deeds. It was all on fire. Everything was falling apart. You would hear the roar of fires, the sound of buildings and rubble collapsing, and the occasional cry of pain and agony if you were there amid the chaos. Kiritsugu was unable to hear anything. All he could do was sit on his knees and stare blankly in horror, tears silently threatening to spill out of his eyes. The world was quiet to him, reminding him of what the Grail had promised him, his wife and child in exchange for the world's sacrifice. His denial of his purported desire infuriated the Grail, which then swore at him and retaliated, creating the scene in hell in front of him. Additionally, he was reminded of the days before when Lancer had cursed the Grail and those who hunted it after his death, saying that it would only bring about destruction. Despite his dark humor, Kiritsugu was unable to find the strength to laugh or even to twitch. The Fourth Holy Grail War, his father, Shirley, Natalia, and all the sacrifices he had made for the greater good, came to mind. Was it worthwhile? His anguished and regretful cries did not improve his concentration or his conscience, or what was left of it. For him, the world suddenly came to life. He heard again, and he was completely scared of it. Hot flames roaring, rubble and other debris sizzling in the heat, buildings collapsing, and cries of anguish and grief. Hold on, sobs. Kiritsugu's dull eyes, which had long since lost their light, scanned his surroundings. He felt hope for the first time in a long time, mostly desperation, though. He was in dire need of survivors. Among the mayhem and devastation he contributed to, he hoped that someone was still alive. In the hopes of discovering a body or someone alive, he combed through the debris. He has yet to see a single body. That scared him too. As if to imply that you were alone all the time, it was almost mocking. Kiritsugu gave a slight shake of his head at those ideas. He needed to find someone because he couldn't think like that. Hours passed while Kiritsugu continued his search. His face had grown more and more expressionless, but not the emotionless murderer's expression for which he was known. No, this was the appearance of a man who had been broken and reduced to a shell. He had to find someone, regardless of the fact that his hands were burned and bleeding from the strain of excavating through hot debris. Even though he was grieving again after discovering a few bodies, he couldn't help but hope that someone else might be nearby because he was holding a dead child. He thus cried out for assistance or recognition, but no one responded. He continued to search as time passed. He appeared even more shattered than before. He was walking slowly and digging through the debris every time he thought he heard something. However, nothing was ever there. He caught a faint, strange sound in the distance that, of all things, sounded like laughter. Desperate to save at least one person from this catastrophe, he trudged forward despite hearing the last thing he would have anticipated. He did not want or anticipate what he found. He saw Kotomine Kirei, the man he had been trying to kill throughout the war and the one who had wanted to kill him in return. Near him, Archer sat on a pile of debris with all the dignity of a smug and elegant emperor. His story was told in the ancient epic of Gilgamesh, and he was known throughout history as the king of heroes in Babylon, Gilgamesh. Of all things, he was completely nude and carefree. Apparently, it was his garden. Kiritsugu pondered idly why he hadn't summoned some clothes he undoubtedly had in his infinite vault in the gates of Babylon, or why he hadn't struck down anyone for being unworthy to look at his nude self. But he dismissed those thoughts with a quick shrug. He was indifferent. The fact that Kirei managed to survive their battle didn't matter to him. Despite having a bullet wound where his heart should be, he didn't care that he could still stand. Or how, out of everyone in the city, the Grail decided to spare those two men. The fact that the three men with the most blood on their hands were still alive amid the destruction of innocence didn't bother him. He didn't care that Kirei's eyes narrowed as if he thought he would rush to kill him, or that he would look shocked and wonder why he was still alive. He simply turned slowly to another rubble pile and dug, because he just didn't give a damn. One figure could be seen stumbling through the debris as night turned to dawn and then to morning. He appeared to be about 7 years old and just under 4 feet tall. His golden, blonde hair stood and fell in all directions and was spiky. In addition, it was currently slightly singed and matted with dust and dirt. His once bright blue eyes, which glowed with innocence and mischievousness, were now dulled by shock and pain from his surroundings. Only a few cuts and scrapes were visible outside of his clothing, and his skin was slightly tanned with odd, light whisker, like birthmarks that were now covered in dust and dirt like his hair. He was dressed in dark blue shorts, a white tee, shirt with orange short sleeves, and dark blue sneakers to complete the ensemble. However, they were covered in dirt and some blood from his wounds, just like the rest of his body. What's his name? He was fairly certain that it was Naruto Uzumaki, though. He wasn't like the other children in the Fuyuki foster home who were dropped off on the stoop like in a movie, with their names written on a note or something. No, he was just discovered. Police officers found him crying like a baby in an alley and just brought him to the house. They did attempt to give him a name, but he rejected them, claiming they didn't feel right, much to the bewilderment of the social workers and caregivers. How, then, did he determine that it was his name? It began around 2 years ago, when he was 5 years old. He started to dream about very specific things. He had his share of specific nightmares in addition to these specific dreams, which happened nearly every night. He continued to see himself, live his life, age, and struggle to survive. He saw himself as much more lonely and louder than he was now. He was raised by himself, with only a few people showing any interest in him. In order to become a shinobi, he attended school, but not any school or academy. His goal was to become the best of them all and take charge of the village so that people would notice and respect him. He struggled academically. In actuality, he was awful. He would skip class to play practical jokes, and even when he did show up, he would barely pay attention. Since he was an orphan, no one could really discipline him. An orphan who was teased by his peers and scowled at or ignored by his village. To be fair, it was all an act, but if it meant that people would notice him, he would prefer to be a loudmouth moron. A few years later, while attempting to take the secret test to graduate and avoid failing the academy a third time, he breaks down in the middle of a clearing in a forest. One of the people in the village who detested him was his sensei, Mizuki. In order to kill Naruto and obtain the forbidden scroll of sealing for himself, he deceived him into stealing it for him. However, after learning that he had stolen the scroll, his other sensei, Iruka, came to find him. In the meantime, he learned a technique called Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clone technique. Mizuki then located the two of them and revealed information that would permanently alter the golden-haired boy. He was a Jinchuriki, a huge sentient being created entirely of chakra that had been given form and life sealed within him. Or more widely referred to by its titles, Demon Fox and Kyuubi no Kitsune. Which brings us to the current state of breakdown. Iruka saved him by acknowledging and defending Naruto, which increased his self-assurance and conviction. Through a sea of Kage Bunshin, he gave Mizuki a case of unending mob beat down while defending Iruka. Iruka graduated him and gave him his headband because of his hard work and rapid acquisition of a high-ranking jutsu. And all of this was the result of dreams within a few weeks. Much of it he didn't understand. Could he? It's not as though anyone could assist him in solving this problem. When you tell someone that you have frequent nightmares and dreams about a ninja version of yourself that seems to have actually happened, they either assume you have a vivid imagination or that you watch too much television. He was going to turn 6. Yes, that would be well received. However, the dreams persisted for Naruto Uzumaki, who now went by that name because he thought it was cool. The ideal self was assigned to a team with his rival, a lazy, one-eyed sensei, and his crush. The test for them didn't go well at first, but they got it down eventually. They went on a couple missions, chores, and finally they got a big one. The dream self was excited they would be leaving the village for the first time to Wave Country. The mission to escort and protect a bridge builder though was misranked with enemy ninja ready to fight them. They actually had to save a country from a corrupt tyrant of a businessman, Gato. They continued ahead anyway and they were confronted by an A-rank missing nin, Zabuza. Had a badass huge sword though, then again to a 6-year-old that sword is either scary or the coolest thing ever. They were able to drive him off but both Kakashi, the sensei, and Zabuza were incapacitated for a week. In the meantime they genin trained. When Naruto's dream self woke up in a clearing after overtraining, he saw a boy who appeared to be a girl and they conversed. It was there where he learned one of his most important life lessons. When people have someone or something precious to protect, they can truly become strong. Naruto in the dreams and the Naruto dreaming took that to heart. In the dream however, the battle at the bridge continued as emotions ran high. Sasuke, the rival, protected Naruto from harm, sending Naruto in a rage of frightening power, unwittingly calling upon his tenant power. He defeated the hunter nin who was Haku the boy from the forest. Conflicted and hesitant, Naruto couldn't finish him. Haku took advantage of this and saved his teacher's life, Zabuza, from an attack from Kakashi. All of the emotions were for naught as the man that pulled all the strings from the country's suffering to the deaths of Haku and others, Gato in all his midget glory. He arrived to murder everyone by himself, behind him, with a couple, 100 or so thugs, The fight amongst ninja stopped and Zabuza charged headfirst and killed Gato and several dozens of other men before succumbing to his wounds. The remaining villagers rallied behind Naruto and Kakashi, intimidating them with clones. After the team departed, the bridge would be finished and given the name Great Naruto Bridge. Yeah, at the time all of this was almost too much for the 6.5-year-old, but the way he looked at it, if them either can do that, so can I. And so began his self-imposed training. He would try to copy the fighting moves like he saw in his dreams and those karate moves and cartoons on TV. In addition, the dreams made him smarter. He could envision himself using new words and phrases, writing them down, reading them, and hearing them. He was far superior to people his own age. As a result, he started recording his dreams in writing to help him remember them. By the time he turned 7, his dreams had shown him himself at the Chunin exams and what had happened, his teammates' curse mark. The training with a super pervert who summoned toads and met the fox inside him, the finals demonstrating his superiority to a genius, the invasion, combating Gaara, another Jinchuriki, defeating Gaara, learning that the old man Hokage had died, and accompanying the super pervert of a sensei to track down his former teammate and persuading her to return and become Hokage. Only to encounter an organization that seeks to apprehend the beast that resides within him, Akatsuki, the other Jinchuriki, and Orochimaru, their final teammate who planned the invasion, the curse mark, and the Hokage's demise. Naruto won the bet he had with Tsunade and brought her back to Konoha, earning a badass necklace in exchange. He also learned a new move called Rasengan and assisted in driving Orochimaru away. However, after Naruto returned, things didn't go as planned. Sasuke, his rival and best friend, became envious of his growing strength, and tensions increased until he made the decision to turn traitor and leave the village to Orochimaru, of all people. Naruto and 4 other people went to get him, but Orochimaru's bodyguards took them away. 1-on-1 death matches were fought one by one. With the assistance of Suna's allies in Gaara and his siblings, some people barely made it through, while others were barely injured. However, Naruto turned to face Sasuke. His most recent nightmare was this. The emotional nature of the fight made it terrible. Brutality was common during the battle. In the end, Sasuke summoned the power of the curse mark, which grotesquely transformed him, while Naruto used the fox's one-tail cloak to become filled with rage and hatred. They summoned their most powerful weapons, Naruto's purple Rasengan, ready to grind and pulverize into dust, and Sasuke's dark Chidori, with the chirping lightning ready to pierce. As they clashed, they jumped at one another and yelled each other's names, encircling each other with a dark sphere to represent their struggle. In the end, Naruto spared Sasuke by scratching his forehead shield as Sasuke punctured his side. Sasuke abandoned Naruto to his dark path and unconsciousness. Naruto had a frightening nightmare. They clashed, and his screams almost woke everyone. After the caregiver gave him some comforting words, he eventually fell back asleep. In the end, his dream was much more pleasant. He was relieved that Orochimaru would not effectively kill Sasuke by taking over his body, and that the Akatsuki would not organize to capture the Jinchuriki for another 3 years, even though he learned in the hospital bed following the fight that Sasuke had managed to escape and that they were pursuing him. Furthermore, he would receive full-time training as an apprentice to Jiraiya, a legendary ninja who was also a super pervert. Following a few farewells and "see you later," he left Konoha and wasn't seen again for 3 years. That was his most recent dream, but this time he was awakened by an earthquake and screams rather than his nightmares. Shocked, he had stumbled out of bed, tripped over his bed's corner, and passed out. The foster home was in ruins, with fire and debris everywhere he looked when he woke up again. It was morning. Idly wondering if he was in hell, the 7-year-old boy with the mentality of a 13-year-old dismissed the thought and continued searching for other survivors of the catastrophe. Despite his increasing lethargy and evident exhaustion, he continued to walk slowly for a few minutes. He finally passed out. He saw a man in his early 30s wearing a trench coat, black dress shirt, pants, tie, and shoes in less than a minute. His black hair was disheveled and spiky, and his dull black eyes were staring at him with complete relief. Idly, Naruto asked himself, why is he crying for me? To whom is he expressing gratitude? And in fact, the boy's survival of his error was due to the man, who was known for his cold-blooded calculation and cunning methods to complete the task, sobbing with relief and repeatedly thanking anyone who would listen. The infamous Magus killer was crying over a boy he had never met who was hurt but still alive. The last thing Naruto saw that morning in the artificial hell was a smile on Emiya Kiritsugu's face amid the joyful sobs of relief, rather than the expressionless, blank face for which he was famous. 1 year has passed since that fateful night, and 8 Year-old Naruto Uzumaki is happier than ever. He found himself in a hospital bed covered in bandages shortly after he awoke from unconsciousness. Additionally, he discovered Emiya Kiritsugu, the man who unintentionally saved him, waiting for him to awaken in his room. He informed him that he had been out for a few days and that he had made the decision to adopt him after finding out that he had been an orphan even prior to the fire. Being Naruto, he leapt from his bed and hugged Kiritsugu while shedding tears, ignoring the machines and IVs that were attached to him. Naturally, this gave the doctors and nurses who were responsible for his care a heart attack. His removal from the machines gave the impression that he had flatlined, and they became alarmed when they realized he shouldn't have recovered completely. His wounds shouldn't have healed in a few days. Naruto was reminded of his dream self, who used the Kyuubi to heal any wounds. Does he now possess something similar? Following his release, Kiritsugu escorted Naruto, who was now known as Emiya Uzumaki, to the land he had purchased during the Fourth Holy Grail War. Naturally, it required a lot of work, so Kiritsugu hired enough workers to complete the task with the money he had accumulated over his regrettable career. Naturally, Naruto assisted whenever he could, learning how things operate and observing how to resolve electrical and appliance issues. The entire property was repaired and updated with the newest technology after a few months. He started to trust his new father with his dreams as he got to know him better. They recently resumed their activities after a 2-week hiatus. In these dreams, he was once again older, roughly 15. His skepticism was evident when he told Kiritsugu this, but his doubts started to fade when he showed him his small journal, which detailed every dream in great detail as something an 8-year-old could never have imagined. However, the doubts vanished when Naruto confronted him following another dream in which he went to save his village leader friend and explained the details of the mission, including how he fought, how he drove off the organization Akatsuki, how he still failed, and how his friend was revived. He suggested to Naruto that he might have been reincarnated into his current life from a previous one. Although it may sound absurd, he only needs to reflect on his life to realize that nothing is impossible. He used magic, resurrected dead apostles, fought alongside and against the Holy Grail's resurrected heroes, and became a magus. Yes, it no longer seems so strange to be reincarnated and to have dreams about a previous life. Thus, he came clean after Naruto did. He informed him that magecraft existed and that he was a magus. "Magic is real?" cried an ecstatic Naruto from the other side of the frame. Kiritsugu responded, "We magus actually call it magecraft, and yes, it is real." Though, based on his dream journal, he was worse in a previous life. He never did grow accustomed to Naruto's energy and hyperpersonality. A slight shiver went down his spine when he imagined an orange-clad, loud-mouthed Naruto running around playing practical jokes on people. It's a good thing he taught him manners. After giving it some thought, Naruto asked, "What about the chakra from my dreams?" "It's the mix of spiritual and physical energy that comes from within the chakra circulatory system." "Well, maybe that is what you used, but here we use magecraft and magic circuits. With OD being the energy coming from within and mana coming from the earth, and the magical circuits within us convert them into prana. This gives us the ability to use magecraft. There is a theory of parallel dimensions, and with magecraft being real, who's to say they aren't? Maybe your past self was from one? I guess." Naruto muttered, "So could I do magecraft? Do I have those circuit things?" With a faint, barely perceptible smile, Kiritsugu replied, "Yeah, you do, and a surprising amount of both circuits and OD actually. I guess if big reserves in your past life got transferred to your life now, huh?" Even though it was only marginally, spending so much time with Naruto has made his life happier. It's hard to avoid being impacted by that vivacious child. Naruto boasted, "Hey, I guess I'm just naturally awesome like that." It seems that the arrogance was also transferred. Naruto smiled again as Kiritsugu said, "Yes, I checked myself last night while you were asleep. You have at least 80 inborn magic circuits. It really is incredible. Though that just means you will have to work that much harder to control it," Kiritsugu said, causing Naruto to collapse in defeat. He complained, "Not again. So can you teach me?" a hopeful Naruto inquired. With regret in his voice, Kiritsugu replied, "I don't want to. It is a dangerous profession, being a magus." By now, Naruto was on his feet and facing Kiritsugu. "I know it may be dangerous. I mean, my past life was nothing but dangerous. With my luck I will get in a bunch of trouble. I want to protect the people that will become precious to me from that trouble and danger. Someone has to," Naruto said. He muttered, recalling the dreams, "It might as well be me. I know what it's like to see someone die. My dreams were realistic. I could practically smell the blood sometimes. Seeing Zabuza charge to his death, witnessing Hiku sacrifice himself, the Chunin exams, the invasion, battling Kabuto and Orochimaru. attempting to save Sasuke and then Gaara. His voice got louder and louder until it was almost shouting, "But you said I have a huge amount of that stuff to make prana. I have the power to help and protect people. It would be insulting if I don't use it," he said. "I would feel terrible knowing that I have the power to stop bad things from happening and I did nothing, so please teach me," yelled Naruto with his body bowed but his head staring straight into Kiritsugu's surprised dull eyes, filled with determination. Kiritsugu gave in with a weary sigh after a few tense moments. Kiritsugu grinned wearily and said, "All right, you win. Always so stubborn and dramatic. Though magecraft should only be used in secret and to the benefit of others, without attracting suspicion or confusion," he issued a warning. "Whatever dad I know, I used to be a shinobi, remember? So, where do I start?" he replied with excitement. He had to learn the theory before he could start learning the cool spells and stuff. Particularly if he wished to manage his enormous number of circuits and OD. To ensure that no energy was wasted, he needed to learn how to use his magic craft effectively. He realized what it was when he compared it to the chakra control exercises he had done in the past. However, that didn't mean he had to like it. It was really dull. What prevented him from having shadow clones that resembled his former self? That transfer of memory would be fantastic. He was able to read all the theoretical material and immediately dive into the fantastic magecraft. After returning from school and practicing theory for a few more months, he was informed that he was now prepared to learn actual magecraft. After Naruto was fitted with the Emiya thaumaturgical crest, he was prepared to learn. His origins were different from Kiritsugu's peculiar affinities for fire and earth, which gave him his severing and binding origins. Instead, he had an affinity for wind, just like his former self. He was taught the fundamental spells, such as night sight, which allowed him to see in the dark, hypnotic suggestions to people who had no magical resistance, and familiars. However, Kiritsugu was not able to teach him the repair spells because it was not in his magical nature. Kiritsugu's ability to instruct Naruto was constrained. He was an anti-magus and a man of war. The curse took care of that. Using the theory he was taught, Naruto had to learn many of the fundamental spells on his own. Kiritsugu was hesitant to teach Naruto his fighting technique, but Naruto soon persuaded him that it was his destiny. That was guaranteed by his past life and his experiences. Thus, Kiritsugu taught Naruto the fundamentals of his family's magecraft, innate time control. They eventually discovered time manipulation, which is the capacity to distinguish the flow of time in the outside world from the passage of time within a specific space, after spending generations investigating and searching for the magic that governs time. It is categorized as high thaumaturgy in the form of a bounded field, which is somewhat similar to a reality marble, though not as difficult to use as other time-related magic or something on the level of true magic that cannot be duplicated. Instead of something more sophisticated like time modification, which can reverse cause and effect and alter the past, it permits time adjustment, which can only slow down time that has already passed and speed up time in the future. The main issue is that the practitioner must take into account the bounded field's size and the range of time that must be adjusted. To activate it, a lot of prana and comparable rites of the same level of high thaumaturgy are needed. It would typically be used over a large area and for a long time, requiring more prana to use and more time to set up as the bounded field grows larger and the time deviation lengthens. Naruto's ability to generate 750 units of prana, with a maximum of almost 1500, was advantageous. He only taught it to Naruto because of Avalon within him, even though it was obviously a dangerous magic that could harm your body's internal systems. However, he was unaware of Naruto's innate Uzumaki vitality, due to Kiritsugu's curse, Angra Mainyu, which was slowly killing him. Kiritsugu was no longer able to demonstrate it, so Naruto also had to learn through theory and word of mouth. In order for Naruto to effectively use the innate time control, he also had to develop his intelligence and teach him strategy. He taught Naruto how to shoot when he was 10 years old. First, just handguns, don't get ahead of yourself. Besides, he was not very good at steadying a rifle. He made him perform the same actions that Natalia had forced upon him. It was painful to watch. It hurt to see Naruto attempting to assemble a gun as fast as possible in an attempt to impress him. It felt like he was trying to win Natalia over so she would take him with her. So many regrets. I hope he won't look back on his actions with Naruto. Another tragedy was too much for him to handle. Naruto was in charge of his own physical training. Kiritsugu wouldn't be able to assist him anyhow. He required assistance to move around the house because he was gradually losing sensation in his limbs. Taiga Fujimura, a kendo girl, lived close by, which was fortunate. She was very helpful, and he couldn't help but swoon over her because she made him think of Shirley. However, she always promised to assist them and teach Naruto self defense, so she returned the favor with Naruto. When Kiritsugu said that, she nearly burst out laughing. Using the magic he is familiar with, Naruto could defeat her before she could blink. Naruto was good at teaching hand combat, whether it was in his dreams from his previous life or while he was fighting himself. Kiritsugu simply observed him generally or pointed out when he appeared unsteady, but in kendo, Taiga would spar with him. However, Naruto preferred to have a kunai, just like in his previous life, rather than a sword. Naruto would have to learn how to maintain and keep them in good condition, but that is something that can be easily learned over time. Kiritsugu bought him a lot of them from an old acquaintance of his. All he needed now was additional instruction, practice, and a much to Kiritsugu's aversion application to find out where he stands. So I have to go out and apply what I have learned. That makes sense. Though how should I go out on a patrol around the seedier side of town? Asked the 11-year-old. He was now a healthy 4 feet 9 inches and a trim 85 pounds, with golden blonde hair that was the same length as when he was younger, light whisker lines still visible, and blue eyes that were still bright with determination and mischievousness. He was wearing a dark blue long-sleeved turtleneck shirt and black cargo shorts, but his shoes were black and orangey. There had to be orange somewhere. He turned the shed into his workshop in the back of the house, where he is currently honing some of his kunai, daggers, and swords, as well as guns ranging from M9s and Kiritsugu's old Thompson Contender to Calico M950s and P90s, sniper rifles in Walther WA2000s, and a U.S. Marine Corps SRT-M24 from an old contact. Sitting across from him, Kiritsugu watched him handle his weapons, and after a moment of waiting and continuing to gaze at Naruto's deft hands taking pride in his tools, he responded. Indeed, your dreams have probably already taught you that experience is crucial. He responded intelligently, and yes, the quickest way to get your feet wet would be to, as you say, patrol the town. A soldier with years of combat experience will fare much better in a war than a professor who has only studied it and never been in it. Hey, I'd be like a superhero patrolling the town he looks after and busting bank robbers. Naruto laughed briefly before raising his head to see his adoptive father staring out the window with a worried, lifeless expression in his dull eyes, seemingly contemplating whether or not to end his life. He had that expression nearly every day. Dad. After waking up from his gloomy reverie, Kiritsugu turned to face his son and responded, "What is it, Naruto?" He started off by saying, "I was wondering," and then, "What?" He was struggling to put it diplomatically and in words. "What happened 4 years ago, and why do you always seem so regretful?" He was taken aback by that, but I suppose it was expected given his behavior, and he simply responded, in his usual tone, "It's nothing you need to know." Even though he is obstinate, Naruto knows when to stop prying. His father's body language said, "Please talk about something else." "I don't want to talk about it," so he did. There was no need to start a fight. "All right, I suppose I should prepare for tonight?" he asked, masking the frown he wanted to show with a phony smile. According to his experience, yes, you should though eat dinner before you leave. You don't know how long you will be out there. All right. He was wearing the same shirt and shoes as before, but he was wearing a black trench coat and black cargo pants. He had a black backpack that held most of his gear, including extra ammo and kunai, a Walther WA2000 rifle with a bi-pod, and finally one smoke and one frag grenade. He was wearing a leather harness over his shirt, but underneath his trench coat, which now held 2 black M9s holstered on either side of his torso, as well as a kunai pouch resembling his previous life on each thigh, and he was obviously prepared for anything. Though there is still some construction going on, the completed buildings look very modern. He was headed to the harbor area, which is where the seedier people live or work. Since the area was still under construction, it provided criminals and drug dealers with an almost ideal cover, allowing them to smuggle their products across the river into the harbor and straight into the urban city. Shakedowns occur where drug deals go bad, and violence follows shakedowns. It has been more than an hour and Naruto has jumped from building to building, stopping on each for about 5 minutes before moving on. So far, he has seen nothing. Sure, there has been the occasional guy walking with a dark hoodie up, but nothing out of the ordinary. He entered an alley and, after checking to make sure no one was looking, swiftly scaled to the top of the building using his shinobi physical skills and minor reinforcement. He then walked to the edge and activated night sight to better see things in the dark and from a distance. When his hearing was finally improved, he heard what sounded like a struggle going on. Sure, you hear sounds like a trash can being knocked over or the typical street noises of stray animals or bums moving around, but this was prolonged, and there were also muffled voices. So, quick thinking, he leapt toward the struggle from the rooftops until he found himself looking down from the building at an alleyway below. What was happening was what appeared to be one of the worst possible outcomes for a shakedown victim. You don't have the money to pay the enforcer. What will happen to you then? Well, that depends on your occupation or personality. If you're a struggling working family man who needed to take out a loan but couldn't pay it back on time or refused to do what was requested in return, like enforce on someone, they'll either trash your house, beat you in front of your family, or beat family members. They beat you, trash your place, and steal valuables if you are a drug addict and you are unable to pay a debt. Are you a wealthy businessman? They may use false or accurate information to blackmail you, but if you are dealing with these thugs, it's usually the case. If you're a woman and you owe them money, the enforcers will either rape you if they're unlucky or take what's valuable and destroy your place if they're nice. If they're not nice, they will beat you and do the former. He pulled his shirt collar up to cover his face, reminding him of his sensei from his previous life, Kakashi, and he leapt lightly to the fire escape below him. He stalked down slowly to the alley and hid among the trash cans, taking a kunai out of his pouch and holding it in a firm reverse grip. He silently breathed in and out deeply before muttering. Time alter. Double XL. Sonomi Ishikawa was crying because she knew what was going to happen and that her punishment would probably be worse if she resisted. This was the third time she had missed a payment, and it wasn't her fault that she couldn't come up with the money quickly as she had to work 3 crappy jobs to even come close to the monthly payments, but now this greasy guy was fondling her with one hand while slapping and beating her with the other. She knew she had gone to the wrong people, but the banks wouldn't give her a loan because of her poor credit and history, so she is paying for it with rape. Suddenly, however, he stopped touching her, and she thought that he was likely attempting to undo his zipper, but she didn't open her eyes because she didn't want to watch him take pleasure in her suffering. She wondered idly, nothing is happening. Why did it get so quiet? She reluctantly opened her eyes to discover that the man was now lying flat on his back with blood accumulating around his neck. She proceeded to investigate and discovered that he had what appeared to be a stab wound to his neck. She looked around, hoping to find someone who had saved her, but she couldn't find anyone. She thanked the person who had saved her in silence, took his money from his wallet, and then hurried back to her apartment to get more money to pay off her debt. As he caught his breath after using double XL, Naruto watched her flee from the building roof once more. He didn't want to risk using his gun or a kunai and the guy making a sudden move and he missed giving himself away, or worse, hit the woman, so he chose the safe and surefire way, which was to use magic. It was his first kill in this world, he realized. He had witnessed a lot of deaths in his previous life, even before the 4th grade Shinobi War, but that war demonstrated it on a large scale. Neji's death was a difficult nightmare for him. He didn't know if the large number of Zetsu clones he killed counted as kills, but he definitely counts Kakuzu as a kill. It's a new and old experience, and it's hard to understand. It makes him uncomfortable. Yes, he doesn't enjoy it, which is good, but he also knows that the man needed to die, and that there will be more like him if he wishes to protect others. Even worse, though, he witnessed the shock on the man's face as the light left his eyes, officially declaring his death. In order to finally go home and sleep, he cleaned his kunai in his bag using a dirty rag, placed it in the pouch, turned around, and leapt from rooftop to rooftop. For once, he might experience a nightmare of his own life. It has been nearly a year since his first patrol, and it wasn't his last. He would go out on patrol once a week after all. He still had skula and he only had to kill 9 times, including the first patrol. The police thought it was typical gang or criminal violence because the victims were mobsters, enforcers, or thugs, but that didn't mean they weren't looking for the culprit. After all, who would suspect a 12-year-old? Perhaps if it were the elemental nations, but this is Fuyuki City, Japan. He continued to train and hone his skills in his physical abilities, weapons, and magecraft. He learned to always train and hone his skills from his dreams of people like Rock Lee and every other normal shinobi. He was also trying to replicate the Rasengan with prana, which is very difficult, but he is still in the 3rd stage, control. After all, he can't make shadow clones to help him. Kiritsugu was shocked, to put it mildly, when he saw a swirling mass of prana in his hand one day, only to have it explode. This was just further evidence of the past life theory. He read the ongoing journal after all, and he plans to publish his diary after some refinement, of course. His past life was so amazing and compelling that he might as well make money off of it, perhaps sell it to a manga company. However, he is currently sitting outside with his adoptive father, gazing up at the moon. After 5 years, Emiya Kiritsugu is a shell of his former self. The Angra Mainyu's curse has taken its toll. His limbs are lame, his sight has dulled, and most of his circuits are useless. He closes his eyes in silent self-loathing as he sits with his strange adopted son and watches the moon, idly reflecting on his life, which he can't help but feel sad and regret when he thinks back from Shirley and his father to sacrificing Natalia, the 4th Holy Grail War, and his inability to save his daughter Ilya. Dad. Hello, elderly gentleman. An irritated Naruto yelled, "Go to bed if you're going to sleep," with a playful smirk that he couldn't see. "Oh. No, I'm fine," he said jokingly, but Naruto could tell the tone was phony. "You know, when I was younger I was a hero. I saved a lot of people, but killed a lot as well. The people I killed would curse me before I died, but the people who knew I had saved them praised and thanked me like heroes." After giving his remarks some thought, he said, "So what, did you give up? But isn't that typical? Are you familiar with this job?" Naruto, who was clearly intrigued, asked. You can't blame him. Aside from teaching him magic, his father never discussed his past. Unfortunately, the answer is yes. You are only a hero for a certain amount of time. When you become an adult it's much harder to call yourself one. He paused for a moment before continuing, but his face looked a lot older right then. There was this saying I heard once, you either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. I regret not realizing it sooner. Oh. I guess when you put it that way, you couldn't avoid it. Yes, you're right. Have you turned into the antagonist? Naruto asked quietly. I'm not entirely sure myself, you know, he answered. Maybe I did in some people's eyes, but maybe in some people's eyes I quit before I became a villain. The moon is really beautiful, isn't it? Kiritsugu said, looking up after a moment of silence and a weary sigh. Yeah, well, since you couldn't become a hero and my past self was a hero, what kind of guy would I be if I didn't try to be one as well? Naruto said firmly, in a slightly playful tone, while nodding absently and humming agreement. I'll be the hero for you, the hero you couldn't be, he said firmly, cutting off the playful tone. After all, I must be true to my name, Emiya Uzumaki Naruto, he concluded with a broad smile. Then, with a determined smirk, Naruto said, leave it to me, I'll accomplish both of our dreams. Kiritsugu turned to him in mild surprise. Yeah, that's a relief, Kiritsugu said, turning back to face the front and exhaling a humorous yet joyful breath. He closed his eyes and reflected on his childhood, telling Shirley that he had always wanted to be a hero. I know Naruto will be a hero, but I want to be one too. Thus, Emiya Kiritsugu, the renowned Magus killer, passed away at the age of 34. All Naruto could do was watch as his mentor, teacher, and most importantly, father of 5 years, quietly passed away after passing on his dream to his son. Unbeknownst to him, tears were silently streaming down his face as he gazed up at him. He turned to face the moon, choked out a sob, and attempted to smile. Yeah, the moon is really beautiful, old man. I'm terrified of this situation in every way. Between two enormous slabs of earth, a monstrous creature with 10 tails tries to escape. Before stopping on the tiger seal, the two men who have caused all the suffering over the past few decades and the current war go through a few hand signals. They stand on either side of the 10-tailed monster, take deep breaths, and then release enormous amounts of fire from their respective jutsu. Bakufu Ranbu, Kaden, Chaotic Dance of the Storm, Fire Release. Goka Metsugyaku, Kaden, Grand Fire Extermination, Fire Release. Even though I'm already worn out, I'm protecting everyone by covering them with a mixture of karamas and my chakra, but I can't help but perspire a little in fear when I see these enormous fireballs headed our way. Nevertheless, I push forward and boost my chakra again, providing everyone with even more protection. The two men use giant magatamas from Madara's Susanoo, an enormous kunai, and shuriken from Obito's pocket dimension, but everyone escapes the fire alive. I use all of my chakra once more to prevent the projectiles from striking my allies, and if I wasn't already worn out, I'm now. I was so worn out that, but for Kakashi, I would have been hit by a surprise attack from Obito, who had come from his dimension. When Obito sees that I'm panting, he kneels down and begins to speak with me. You have only been covering other people's asses, Naruto. Is there a rationale behind your actions? Kurama, meanwhile, warns me that the Jubi is charging up chakra and chastises me for using his chakra, saying I'll burn out. You're exhausting yourself for no reason, Obito goes on. I wouldn't expect someone like you to understand, I say, startling him. As I continue, I lunge forward to launch a chakra claw attack. Having my comrades around makes me happy because they support and encourage me. I slash at him, but he escapes before I can. Why bother protecting your comrades to such an extent if you can relate to their suffering and perceive death as an additional bond? Obito queries. I feel sick from that fucking mouth of yours. You give me every reason to think you're a self-centered jerk. So keep spouting your shit, I won't listen. Because we accept the pain of our comrades' deaths despite the fact that it is excruciating and numbing. I don't want to throw that pain away. I may be self-centered, but it hurts my heart more than words can express when I'm alone. Period. I glare up at Obito and cover my heart with my hand to finish. The Jubi finally escapes the enormous slabs of earth as Obito gives me a glare in return. It roars as it breaks free from its makeshift prison and lets out another ear. Spitting shriek as its arms enlarge. I'm warned by Kurama that it's getting ready for Tenben-chi, heaven and earth paranormality. Before Obito continues talking while facing the 10 tails. When you cut me off from the Jubi, this is what happens. It can no longer be suppressed. Perhaps I should now become its Jinchuriki. Suddenly, the Jubi roars again, the sky above clears of smoke, clouds form, and lightning strikes. Kakashi is about to use his Kamui to destroy the Jubi, but Obito gets in the way, and they both enter the pocket dimension to battle. Everyone is overpowered by the power that swirls around the Jubi as rocks and debris swirl around destroying the land before it explodes in a maelstrom of power. The Jubi then roars again, releasing its energy as a concussive force, shattering the landscape and creating a huge crater while the surrounding superstorm becomes filled with tornadoes and lightning storms. The blast's power is symbolized by the mushroom cloud of dust and debris that forms from its energy release alone. I am back to my normal state, with my clothes tattered, my arm and face bleeding, my chakra depleted, and the Jubi just making eye contact with me. As the dust settles, it is revealed that everyone in the army is unharmed, just dazed, and that my chakra saved them once more. However, it is now flickering and fading away in my exhaustion, and I can't even summon it to surround myself. Fuck. I tremble as my body gives out and the last of my chakra that was protecting everyone disappears, but as I look up, I see everyone standing in front of me to fight while Sakura heals me. I couldn't help but smirk. This is what it means to be comrades. The Jubi roars as its arms bulge again and put its hands together like it's praying as it gathers its chakra once again. I am aware that even if we still had my chakra, most of us wouldn't be able to survive it, but the Jubi opens its mouth to insane proportions and a huge bulge emerges, opening into a hideous flower that starts to charge up another Biju Dama of monstrous proportions. Sakura rallies everyone as she heals me, and Shikamaru devises a plan to build a lot of earth walls. With Ino's help, they contact everyone and proceed with the plan, raising wall after wall in preparation, even though I know it isn't enough because I use the damn technique. And this is powered by the Jubi. But I can't think negatively, I have to believe in them. Even as the Jubi fires its ball of destruction, even after it plows through wall after wall, I close my eyes, trying to convince myself that they can do it, even as the ball keeps moving forward despite Killer Bee's attempts to hit it with his own Biju Dama and then throw his body in the way in his Hachibi form. The ball of destruction vanished, but nothing happened. I look up when I hear a kunai pierce the ground. It's a well-known pronged kunai with a ceiling script that denotes the approach of my idol and hero. When time and space are warped, Minato Namikaze, the Edo Tensai, resurrected Yondaime Hokage, asks in jest, "Am I late?" "No, you're right on time, Dad," I smirk in response. "Senpai. Naruto. Senpai." Naruto, a blonde, groans as he rolls his shoulders to release the tension from sleeping on his dojo floor. "Good morning, Sakura. Chan." He grins sheepishly and scratches the back of his head after being discovered dozing off on the ground. Sakura Matu wears the typical Homohara girl's uniform, has shoulder-length violet hair with a red ribbon on the left side keeping her hair from falling over her ear, and violet eyes that seemed dull to him, as if she had gone through something horrible. "Good morning, Senpai. You still have time to get ready," she responds with a gentle smile. He found Japanese formalities annoying at times, and he never got her to stop calling him Senpai. She would shyly look away and say she couldn't do that, saying she should show respect and all that. "It's strange that you oversleep." She was such a sweet girl. "Well, I suppose my nighttime jog left me more exhausted than I had anticipated." "Sorry," Naruto said sheepishly once more, but by night jog, he meant that he arrived home late from his weekly patrol. He always made an effort to jog around town at least once a week, he would tell Sakura and Taiga. They don't really question it, probably because they followed him that one time just to see what he was doing. That night, he didn't go on patrol, but he sensed them as soon as they left his house. There was no way he would go on patrol knowing they were pursuing him, even though Taiga was probably the one who forced Sakura to accompany him. She simply tucks her purple hair behind her ear once more and smiles sweetly, saying, "Don't be. I would be happier if you occasionally overslept. It would be beneficial for me to look after you." With his eyes closed, Naruto simply sighed mockingly and said, "What am I going to do with you, huh?" He got up to stretch again, showing off his new size. Naruto is currently 5 feet 10 inches and 160 pounds at the age of 17. He was extremely lean due to his consistent training, which kept him in a compact athletic build. He thought that if he grew his bangs out like Sasuke or his father, he would likely become irritated with them and they would constantly get in his face or tickle his nose, so he kept his blonde hair moderately short. He still has his bright blue eyes, which make most girls blush when he looks at them, and his whisker marks, which made many girls laugh because they thought they were cute or stare in wonder. Black sweatpants, a dark orange shirt, and black running shoes are his staple workout attire. Wearing these clothes and his backpack, he leaves the house, changes into his patrol gear, and then returns to his workout attire. He says, "Well, let's to making breakfast, yeah," as he turns to go. She denies in her typical gentle tone, "No, it's okay. You get ready for school. I can take care of breakfast, so please take your time. Also, Fujimura Sensei will be here soon." Naruto sighs again and then smiles amiably before pouting and teasingly saying, "I swear Sakura-chan, bossing me around like my wife or something." She starts to get wide-eyed and blushes, and her mouth opens to deny the teasing, but he interrupts with a laugh, Sorry, I'm just teasing. I'll get on it, Sakura-chan." He exits the dojo, waving over his shoulder, but he doesn't notice the blush that doesn't go away or the look of longing on her face before she gets up and runs to the kitchen. The dreams once more. Why is the Fourth Shinobi War the subject of so many dreams lately? He no longer has as many dreams about his former life as he did as a child. However, the war has been the subject of all recent dreams. Before they returned in full force, they would occasionally relive some of his earlier experiences or go for extended periods of time without having any dreams about his former life. However, now, the war is the only thing he dreams about. I pray that this isn't a foreshadowing of some kind. Naruto considers the 5 years since his father's passing as he puts his clothes in the washing machine. Because he owed his father a favor, Raiga Fujimura helped cover his costs. In the city, however, he now uses them as contacts. The reason was that he found out that Raiga was the one giving him his weapons. So they came to an agreement. He wouldn't break their deals, and Raiga would give him information about what was happening in the underworld. After his father passed away, Taiga became like a sister to him. Although it occasionally seems like it's the other way around because she would snatch him for food, she actually became his legal guardian. Sakura Matu must be the exact opposite of Sakura from his previous existence. After Naruto became irresponsible during a patrol a year ago, Sakura arrived to assist around the house. He had gone out after a cram training session and after sniping several guys in a building by hopping from rooftop to rooftop on the nearby buildings as fast as he could, exhausting himself. Naturally, he accomplished the goal, but he was worn out on the way home. When Naruto leapt from a building to reach his street, he actually dozed off for a brief period of time before breaking his wrist and radius in the fall. Naruto immediately attributed it to his part-time work lifting heavy objects at a warehouse. She offered to assist him with cooking and other tasks after learning that he had been injured. Since then, she has continued. He would try his hardest to blend in at school. Even though your whisker tattoos are real birthmarks, it is difficult to look like a Californian when you are taller than everyone else. Why is no one going to believe him? They believe that he is a criminal or something. His innate athletic prowess also garnered a lot of attention. He would try his hardest to adopt the minimal approach, but that would only enrage most people because it appears as though he is demeaning them by saying, "I'm not even trying." To the dismay of the other guys, he also attracted a lot of girls with his attractive appearance and laid-back, easygoing demeanor without really trying. He was attempting to hide, but it appears that he is unable to do so. Reluctantly, he is among the most popular guys at school. It's not as if he gives a damn. His Taiga.ne is the only reason he goes. If he refused to go, she would kick his ass. Before her female rage, he turns into an ant. It's unfair. It resembles Tsunade and Sakura from his previous existence. In any case, how does she make her kendo strikes so painful? Speaking of the devil, oi, Naruto, hurry up, I'm getting tired of waiting on you. Naruto simply sighs as he puts on his orange-collared black shirt and covers it with his khaki school jacket, which he chooses to leave open rather than button. Sakura and Taiga are already waiting for him when he enters the dining room to eat breakfast. One appears as lovely and compassionate as ever, while the other appears slightly irritated. She has short, light brown hair, a green dress, a shirt with black and yellow stripes, and white shoes. Taiga Fujimura is this person. Across the table, she turns to Sakura and sarcastically remarks, "Sakura, you spoil Naruto too much, he will take advantage of you." Naruto started to say, "Oi, I do not, she does all this even though I ask her not to, she is just a really sweet girl. Unlike some moocher I know." But stopped when he sensed a dark aura emanating to his right. He turns to face it stiffly, freezing in horror like a deer staring down a shotgun. Taiga appeared utterly malevolent at that moment. A bloodthirsty tiger with enormous fangs was depicted staring down at him, and although her eyes were shadowed, they were gleaming red and dangerously. To exacerbate the situation, she suddenly pulled out her dreaded Bakken and started to gently stroke it. She then replied, "What was that?" "I promised Kiritsugu that I would be your guardian until you grew up to be a respectable adult. You don't want to make my duty difficult, do you?" Fortunately for Naruto, Sakura stepped in and gave him a bowl of rice, saying, "I'm not spoiling him, he just looked tired is all." But Naruto's remark about the miso soup he had tasted cut her off. "TCH, making my duty difficult every day." "Ah, Sakura, this miso soup is great. Well, you taught me well, senpai." They were unaware of Taiga's dangerously increasing twitch, but for Naruto, it was too late. "Listen to me, damn it," she cried as she suddenly produced her Bakken once more. She then struck Naruto in the head, sending him flying from the room. It wasn't until then that she realized the time and hurried out of the house, claiming she still had tests to grade. When Sakura said, "Fujimura," Sensei seemed a little more tense than usual. With a tiny drop of perspiration, Naruto had recovered and was assisting with the dishes. He thought, sweating, "Oh, well, that's Taiga.ne for you." No, that happens a lot, though pulling out the Bakken twice in one setting is rare. The news had informed them that more gas leaks were occurring in Shinto, but it smelled like magic, so he didn't believe it. Tonight, he considered taking another night jog to see how it went. He saw police cars speeding by them, which made him want to look into it more. "What could be happening, senpai?" Sakura asked, interrupting his train of thought. "I don't know, but we should let them handle it. Don't worry, Sakura-chan." She responds in a gentle voice, "Okay." Later on at school, we see Naruto ignoring the stares and whispers he receives from the crowds as he makes his way to his homeroom, his hands in his pockets and a bored expression on his face. "It seems as though they don't think I can hear them talking about me, I swear." However, when someone else entered her homeroom, the discussions about him ceased. Rin Tasaka was that person. Rin has long black hair that she wears in pigtails tied with black ribbons, and she has blue eyes. She is dressed in a long red coat and the typical Homurahara girl's uniform. It seems that the male students here look up to her. Although he never really speaks with her because she is in a different class, he finds her to be decent enough. They didn't even look at one another as they passed. Rin glances over her shoulder to watch Naruto enter his homeroom after he passes her, at least in Naruto's imagination. She sighs and enters hers, following suit. While waiting for his homeroom teacher, adoptive sister, or fearsome guardian to arrive, Naruto sits in the back of his class and looks out the window. He sighs, closes his eyes, and waits for the train wreck until he hears a voice that sounds suspiciously like, "Late," and grows steadily. "Good morning," she exclaims as she finally rushes in and bumps into her desk. Naturally, a few students inquire about her well-being, but some choose to provoke her by referring to the nickname she despises as Tiger. For him, it was just another morning. She informs the class that most activities will be shortened due to the new curfew that has been implemented because of the recent accidents, which causes Naruto to squint suspiciously. Is a citywide curfew necessary in light of a few gas leak incidents? In any case, he has no intention of ceasing his patrols anytime soon. Taiga leaves the classroom to make room for Tsuchiro Kazuki, the next instructor. He has always been viewed with suspicion by Naruto. "I am a trained killer," is evident in the way he carries himself, walks, and looks at people. Of course, when you have been dreaming of killers and trained soldiers most of your life and you become one yourself, it's not hard to notice, which of course this means that he could possibly know he is one as well. "I'll have to watch myself around him," he thought as Kazuki continued the lesson. He had been informed during lunch that last night there had been a murder. That was what the police cars were rushing over to this morning. Apparently it was due the death was caused by a long spear or sword-like object. Quite odd use. It must be a crazy person. Normal killers resort to guns or knives, not spears. He might be able to stop incidents like this if he went on patrol more frequently. Idly, however, he recalled his father's cynical statement, "Saving one life means not saving another." He realized that if he was saving one man, it meant he couldn't be there to save another. Then, he thought jokingly, shadow clones would be really useful, before he became serious once more. "But that doesn't mean I won't try. I still keep my word to my father, so I won't break it," with determination, he thought. He abruptly stopped, but his senses were acting strangely. Prana found herself flung about the city. The hell? When did all these magi arrive? My mind isn't in the right frame of mind, so I can't go on patrol today. God, none of this makes any fucking sense. And I could die if I'm not focused. As he was walking home, he felt a sudden rush of prana in front of him. When he looked up, he saw a small albino girl grinning and wearing a purple outfit and hat. "You're going to die, Oni-chan, if you don't hurry and summon your servant," she says abruptly and menacingly. There was nothing there when he turned to face her. It shouldn't be so easy for someone to get the drop on me and leave my senses, not a little girl, in particular. He pondered anxiously. He rushed home, seeing this as a sign. Dinner finally began after Taiga gave a lecture and threatened to use the dreaded Bakken for staying out so late. Taiga mooched once more, and Sakura assisted with dinner once more. Following yet another altercation between Naruto and Taiga, Sakura checked on him after the Bakken was removed before Taiga and Sakura headed to their separate residences for the evening. The bashful Sakura said, "Well, good night." "Yeah, good night Sakura-chan," Naruto exclaimed, grinning broadly. "Take care of her Taiga." She yelled excitedly, "Yeah, leave it to me. Come on Sakura-chan." Naruto grinned as he watched them leave, then turned around and shut his door. Naruto was now in his backyard workshop, sharpening some of his kunai and cleaning the most recent guns. His hands strayed over a particular personalized knife, admiring its elegance. In a way, it was always therapeutic for him, keeping his dexterous hands occupied and serving as a reminder of his life's purpose. To defend his beloved people and defend those who are unable to defend themselves. Even if no one ever recognizes their hero, to be a hero nonetheless. He will be content as long as his actions save an innocent person. Since he is Naruto Emiya Uzumaki, son of Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, the reincarnation of Emiya Kiritsugu, and the least he could do to live up to those names would be to save lives and be a hero. After yet another morning of Sakura spoiling me and Taiga mooching, we find Naruto and Sakura conversing after he calls her out on it, only to be met with the bloodthirsty tiger image, not the cute one in class, and her threatening him with her Bakken once more. He still doesn't know where she pulls it out from. "Hey Sakura, I have told you this so many times, you don't need to come on the weekends to help. I'm sure you have your own plans," Naruto grumbles. She paused to say, "No, I really don't. I don't really go out to have fun on weekends." As a slight flush touched her cheeks. "Unless I have dates or other personal matters," she concluded with her trademark charming smile. "Ah, but still you shouldn't push yourself so hard for my sake, okay? Think of it as a request from your Naruto senpai," he said with a broad grin. "Understood, senpai. He's not a moron." Sakura likes Naruto, but he doesn't know why or how much. Normally, he wouldn't have to patrol every week and kill criminals, so he would have asked her out at that very moment. Since he isn't normal, he doesn't exist in a normal world. Naruto listened to the conversations among the students as he made his way to homeroom. Shinji Matu is reportedly venting his resentment towards the new members of the archery club after being turned down by the Tasaka girl. Great, another inferiority complex. Afflicted jerk. He will never know how that guy is related to a sweetheart like Sakura. Oh, well, I'll let him have his fun as long as he doesn't annoy me or anyone I know. Since guys like him typically have the tiniest dicks, I feel sorry for him. In the meantime, Shinji was grinning as usual while speaking to a group of girls when his expression changed to one of outrage and then outrage. "Why would I want Ryder to murder a blonde?" We find Naruto in one of the trees near the archery dojo as the sun sets following yet another dull school day. Since Naruto is usually up all night working in his shop or on patrol, he would occasionally take naps after school. Therefore, he sleeps whenever he can, even if it's on the roof of a school building or up in a tree. All he needs is to use his backpack as a pillow. However, a loud clash of weapons wakes him from his slumber. Because he only hears weapons clashing like this when he dreams of battles in the elemental nations, he initially believed he was dreaming or hearing things. However, he recognizes that magic is taking place when he feels prana permeating the atmosphere. Naruto sighs as he reaches into his backpack and retrieves a leather harness that he has seen before, this time with two M9 saw, one black with a silencer attached, the other gray. After putting on the harness, he removes his school jacket and replaces it. He will have to settle for his beauty on calf since he failed to bring his kunai pouches. He pulls his pant leg up to his knee and reaches down to his right leg, revealing another holster containing a large trench knife that resembles the ones Asuma used in his dreams. The design is the same, even though the metals are obviously different, but that doesn't mean he didn't add anything. Instead, he welded a unique silverish gem onto the hilt to aid in combat. Consequently, it became one of his two mystic codes and a jeweled trench knife. He takes hold of the knife in his right hand and gradually disappears into the darkness. He discovers the most bizarre things he has ever seen outside of dreams. In the center of the school courtyard, two men were engaged in combat. That wasn't the odd part. The first was what they were wearing and using to fight. The first man had short, blue hair, but from the back of his head, he had a long ponytail. He appears to be wearing full body, deep ultramarine tights with white stripes running down them. On his shoulders are silver pauldrons as well. He is proficient with a red spear, which is his preferred weapon. The second man appeared to be wearing ancient Greek armor, with leather straps over his shoulders, a bronze plated torso, and a tunic of the same material. He had gray eyes and pale brown hair that reached his shoulders. With the exception of the traditional helmet and shield, he resembled a Greek warrior. Although he was not brandishing a sword, he was deftly avoiding the lance and shooting a flurry of arrows from his black bow. Additionally, he used his bow to deflect the spear whenever it came too close, demonstrating its strength. The archer leaps back and glares resolutely as he prepares another arrow after deflecting another blow. Watching the fight unfold in front of him, Naruto is in disbelief. Although he has witnessed shootouts and put an end to a few of them himself, witnessing a conflict of this magnitude is breathtaking. Unfortunately for Naruto, a piece of his gear caught the moonlight and made him noticeable to both fighters. When Naruto glanced down at his right hand, his knife emerged from the moonlight shadows. Fuck me. Naruto decided to get the fuck out of there as soon as possible because he knew that a covert retreat was unnecessary. After giving his legs a little extra support, he left in the hopes of losing him soon and went into the school. He slowed down and moved into the shadows as he entered a dim hallway, ready to use Time Alter if needed. Before he pulled out his gray M9 in his left hand and held it up at the spear warrior, he abruptly raised his knife to deflect an incoming red spear to the wall next to him. He then leapt back, deflecting more blows. Remember how Snake holds his pistol with his knife in MGS4. You think you can beat me? I thought you were assassin at first, but you're just a human. You can't beat a servant. Exclaims Lancer, who is stalking forward with a sadistic grin and amusement in his red, slitted eyes. He then rushes forward to pierce Naruto's heart. Time Alter. Double XL. Naruto muttered. Naruto sidestepped the spear, and everything slowed down for him. As he did so, he could see the spear user's eyes gradually widening, but he simply kept making the same movements. He deflected the spear upward with his knife, allowing Naruto to enter the man's torso. He then aimed the gray M9 at the man's chest and fired twice. The outcome? A spear-wielding man was sent flying across the hallway and a small trail of blood following him. The man, much to Naruto's surprise, rose with a groan and touched his chest, which was not bleeding as much as he would have liked. How are you standing? That should have put you down, exclaimed Naruto, who was confused and a little scared. This is nothing. But what was that? That was no ordinary magecraft you just did. You shouldn't be able to wound me even a little, shouted a furious Lancer. Well, I don't feel obligated to tell you, Naruto retorted. He yelled, Guy bold, as his spear started to strangely smoke. Fine, I guess I'll end you here quickly. Time Alter. Triple XL. After dodging the slow thrust by moving to the right, Naruto watched as everything returned to normal without him having to cancel his magic. He felt pain all of a sudden. He looked down and coughed up blood. The spear's tip protruded from his chest, shocking him. When he turned around, he saw that the spear had actually twisted and bent in his direction as he dodged. Guy bold. A cursed spear that pieces its enemy's heart no matter what. The thrust is just for show really, to prove the spear was even used. You put up a decent fight for a human. You managed to wound me and have me use Guy bold. You could have been the seventh one. I'll give you my name before you die as a courtesy, Servant Class Lancer, Ka Chilane. He then laughed and put the spear away from his chest before leaving Naruto to die. Fuck. Is this how I pass away? Before I could complete my promise? He thought as he went unconscious. Naruto's hand went to his chest as soon as he woke up, gasping. He noticed the blood on his hand and the rip in his clothing, which pointed to a clean stab wound that shouldn't have been there. It seemed odd to him, but he gathered his belongings and equipment, a peculiar necklace made of jewels, and headed home. His senses went into overdrive, demanding that he get up and move while he was walking through his house on his way to his workshop, thinking about what he had just experienced. Thus, he unholstered both M9s at his adversary and rolled to his side. Fortunately, that damned red spear was right where he was standing. He ignored the fact that he had two guns aimed at him as he walked nonchalantly toward his spear and glanced up at the man who had almost killed him. Lancer laughed and said, I knew you were interesting, but surviving Guy bold, that takes it. But to think I would have to kill the same person twice in one day, how annoying. Naruto started shooting with his black M9, but Lancer simply ducked the bullets. I understand now. That gray gun is your mystic code, isn't it? It doesn't fire bullets like that black one. No, it fires concussive and piercing wind bullets. Truly powerful and dangerous anti-unit technique. Especially mixed with that magecraft of yours. Naruto thought uneasily, damn, I hate it when people read me so easily. I'll have a better chance of defeating him in my workshop, so I need to get there quickly to prevent him from using that spear's power on me again. Breaking through his nearby window, Naruto leapt out into the backyard. With minor reinforcement to his legs, he sprinted toward his workshop. He pushed open the doors after rolling under Lancer's kick. He started firing both M9s in an attempt to keep Lancer from reaching for the supplies he needed. The summoning circle was forming in the corner, but neither fighter saw it. Although Lancer's runes helped ensure that the bullets only made glancing hits and scraped him, he managed to deflect the regular bullets and avoid the wind ones, but it was still incredibly annoying. Naruto hurried to his desk and struck it twice with his fist, revealing a hidden drawer that was loaded with springs. He produced a sawed-off shotgun and aimed it at Lancer, who was casually approaching him until he noticed the weapon. Naruto grinned and uttered, "Eat this bitch." Though he knew it wasn't over, he fired the 2 rounds point blank in the hopes of causing some damage. That guy was going to get up from that if he could take his wind bullets without any issues. He prepared for close combat by obtaining his trench knife and his second mystic code. Because Lancer somehow avoided his shot, Naruto's hope that he would sustain enough injuries to allow them to fight on an even playing field was crushed. He wasn't pleased either. Lancer dislikes devious tactics more than anything else. He charged at Naruto with ferocity, suggesting that he was being devious by drawing a surprise shotgun and firing it. He yelled, "I'm tired of this charade." Despite his best efforts, Naruto was unable to parry the blows. He couldn't get a strike in himself to use his mystic code, and he was getting cut all over. He was feeling overpowered. He got his chance when there was a pause in the strikes. Time Alter. Triple Excel. In an attempt to get some room before preparing his mystic code, Naruto blurred backwards. Using his prana, he charged it and yelled, "Heen." A gust of wind, like energy, shot toward Lancer at incredible speeds. Before he was struck, all he could do was brace himself. Despite skidding back a few feet, he maintained his strength. He prepared by activating his runes to full power and crossing his arms in a X to protect himself. Nevertheless, a thin, bloody cut still developed diagonally from his left hip, up toward his right shoulder, and across both arms. Lancer gave him a ferocious look, but Naruto simply glared back, saying, "I'm not gonna die here, you bastard. I made a promise, and I don't go back on my word. I can't die." Then, to the surprise of both fighters, the summoning circle came to life in a dazzling light. And out of the summoning circle came a young petite woman wearing a blue dress with plated armor around her torso, plated metal gauntlets up to her forearms, and more plated armor from the sides of her hips down to the end of her dress. Her bright emerald eyes and bangs frame her face, and her blonde hair is tied up in a bun with a blue ribbon. With an invisible weapon, she charges forward and knocks Lancer away, sending Naruto sprawling to the ground in a shockwave. "Servant, Saber. Upon your summoning, I have come forth. I ask of you, are you my master?" she said stoically as she turned to face Naruto. Naruto was both shocked and enthralled, so he didn't respond right away. This elegant, beautiful, but deceptively powerful with those shocking green eyes just asked him if he was her master. What? He stumbled to say. "I am Servant Saber, upon your summoning I have come forth." She repeated, "Master, your orders. From now on you will have my sword, and you destiny shall be mine. This completes our pact." Then he shakes his head and gets up, saying, "Yeah, I guess I am. I guess in the heat of the fight I didn't notice the summoning circle." Naruto just stares dumbly. She simply nodded before bolting outside. A few seconds later, Naruto followed in spite of his surprise. He saw Saber and Lancer fighting all over the yard when he got outside. Because of his affinity, Naruto could see that Saber's invisible weapon was covered in wind, and Lancer's cursed red spear. He was astounded by Saber's exquisite swordplay. She moved fluidly with all of her blows and parries, wasting no movement. "Cheater. How dare you conceal your own weapon?" he growled after Lancer was finally pushed back following another altercation. With a chilly expression on her face, Saber simply rushed forward and gave him another forceful blow to push him away. She raised her head slightly and flipped her hair, asking, "What's wrong, Lancer?" Idly standing around tarnishes the reputation of lance users. "If you are not striking, then the pleasure shall be mine." With a cruel grin, Lancer said, "Let me ask you one thing first. Your noble phantasm, is it a sword?" With her eyes shaded, she answered, "Now what could it be? An axe? A spear? A bow maybe?" Lancer simply laughed and said, "Spare me the jokes, Saber." His spear started to smoke in a way that was familiar to Naruto, who became very alarmed and said, "If she gets hit by that. This is only our first meeting. Any chance of settling this fight as a draw?" he asked ominously. "I refuse your proposal, you shall be defeated here." Heen. Lancer's focus on his spear was broken by a bluish slash of wind. Like energy that flew toward him. He had to dodge to avoid being struck by it again. However, as he stood by Saber, he continued to glare at Naruto. When Saber glared at him for interfering, he responded, "Careful, that spear when activated will pierce your heart no matter what. I think it was called Guy Bold." She nodded appreciatively. "How do you know though?" "Experience." "I see, a curse." "No, it was a reversal of causality then." "You must be Ireland's champion." She responded with disbelief. "Guy Bold. The enchanted barbs that can break any defense, it sets its opponent's heart as its goal, and the movement of the spear will change to accomplish it." That was answered by Naruto. He had personally seen that insane spear. Is this the cursed red spear that the Hound of Kulan wields? Well shit. I'm screwed now. You have a competent master that stopped you from getting hurt after he recognized the attack. I'm in trouble if I use this W weapon and my opponent doesn't die. He grumbled. I wonder if this weapon is too famous or not. When a servant's identity is revealed, a servant should fight to the end. But my master is a coward, you see, telling me bullshit like return if your lance is dodged. Are you running away? Chase me if you want, at your master expense. Hold it. But after giving his words some thought, she turned to face her new master, who was now on his knees, breathing heavily, and appearing more worn out. Unfortunately, she refrained from pursuing him. We will finish this Lancer. In Naruto's workshop, where he is patching himself up with Saber's occasional assistance, we find our pair of master and servant. Naruto is posing queries in the interim. So I am your master? Yes, though it seems not a legitimate one. I figured, I didn't do that summoning circle. Even so, you are my master, and I will never betray you, having made a pact with you. Naruto didn't notice, but Saber's eyes widened a little before returning to their stoic expression. Well, that's nice, but I never introduced myself. I am Emiya Uzumaki Naruto, nice to meet you. Well, what's your name? I doubt it's Saber. I can't reveal my name, if I do others might find out who I am and use it to find my weaknesses. You think I am gonna tell others your name if it leads to your defeat? Naruto said with a deadpan expression. Arturia Pendragon, King of Britain. Wow, so King Arthur was a woman. Do you have a problem with that? No, none whatsoever. I know women can be strong. I knew plenty that can kick my ass. Good. So care to tell me what this whole thing was about? You don't know? It's the 5th Holy Grail War, a fight between 7 magi for the Holy Grail that will grant the winner their heart's desire. The Magus involved summon heroic spirits from the past as servants brought forth by the Grail itself to help them obtain the Grail. Under his breath, Naruto moaned, "Good God, another war?" When Saber sensed another master and servant close by, she stopped, even though she was curious about what her new master meant by that. Without Naruto's confirmation, she fled ahead, saying, "There is another servant with their master nearby. I will confront them." This made Naruto sweat and run after her, holstering another gun in his harness and holding his trench knife. When he heard a clash, he saw Rin Tasaka and the Greek guy from the school courtyard, who was Saber on top of him. With her command, "Archer, vanish," Rin could see that Saber was controlling the man. When Saber realized her enemy was gone but the master was still open, she charged at Rin next. Rin attempted to use the jewels, but they were useless, and Saber continued to charge, poised to strike. Saber, that's enough. Naruto was approaching her when Saber halted and turned around. Naruto, this is Archer's master. Another master in the war. With a sigh, Naruto spoke. Look Saber, let's calm down for a moment and not slash first, ask questions later. Besides, I don't really understand the concept of this war right now anyway. You need to explain it for me in detail and... Tasaka Rin? Hey there Emiya.kun. Naruto is shown in his house attempting to mend and clean up the wounds from combat. Repairing bullet holes from his own guns is awful, so that's the last time he fights in his home. Saber kept a close eye on Rin to make sure she didn't try anything, and Rin was using her magic to fix the window that he had broken when he leapt through it. As Rin casually observed Naruto repairing his walls and floor after Lancer deflected bullets in the same manner, she said, "I'm glad you can do this too, I don't have to do all the work now." With a small smirk, Naruto remarked, "Yeah, well, how else can I practice how to shoot without suspicion? Bullet holes attract a lot of attention, you know." Rin exclaimed incredulously, "By the way, guns? What kind of magus uses guns?" He cheekily replied, "A progressive one? A smart one? A deadly one? An awesome one?" She narrowed her eyes and said, An unnecessary brutish approach before magecraft, such as illusions, paralysis methods, and defensive bounded fields. Naruto responded by blurring in behind her, pointing his gun at her head, and whispering in her ear, "That arrogance of magi is what usually gets them killed from a single bullet." He then brought his jeweled trench knife up to her throat, further stopping her in her tracks, saying, "Or a knife to the throat, and besides." Before returning to his previous position of fixing the walls and concluding, "I don't only use weapons, I have my magecraft too." She asked shakily, "WH? What magecraft was that? Speed enhancement? Was that a jeweled knife? You use jewels too?" she asked, realizing what had been at her throat just a moment before. Rin sighed as he said, "Well, I don't feel like telling you my magecraft," adding, "and I only use the jewels to enhance my weapons." "So they become your mystic codes? What is your affinity?" "Oh, fishing for information, Miss School Idol?" she asked while grinning. "You're gonna have to be more subtle than that." When Rin saw his blank face fixed on her, she asked, "Do you have any idea about the situation you're in right now?" Rin exclaimed, "WH? Whatever? Idiot," before coughing and gathering herself. "Anyway, I can't believe a magus like you summoned Saber. You would probably be better off with Assassin." He trailed off, glancing at Saber, who nodded, before continuing, glaring at Rin, "I would know more if someone didn't decide to come over uninvited and interrupt our conversation." "Well, Saber said something about a war," he said. "Well, excuse me for trying to make sure you were alright." Rin simply huffed and crossed her arms in Tsunere pose number 2. The picture I used to describe the poses is actually on my profile through a link. When Naruto gave her a startled expression, she became flustered once more and said, I mean I wanted to make sure that you didn't waste my time for saving you by dying again." As he went to retrieve it from his bag, he trailed off, "You saved my life. Oh, back when Lancer stabbed me at school. So this was your jeweled necklace?" "Yeah, here it is," he said with a warm smile as he gave it to her. "Thanks, you didn't have to do that, but you saved me anyway, thanks a lot. I'm in your debt, so if you need anything you know where to find me," he said, finishing with a close-eyed smile that prevented him from seeing Rin's blush, which was getting bigger as a result of the praise. She finished striking Tsunere pose number 3, making Naruto and Saber perspire. "Whatever, idiot. I just didn't want to be responsible for a death because someone saw our fight. But anyway, you have no idea what you got yourself into. I thought we already established that. You got yourself involved in a certain game called the Holy Grail War, which consists of 7 masters fighting and killing each other in an attempt to obtain the Holy Grail. Why do the battles take place in the city though? Wouldn't it be better to fight away from innocents and from those who don't know about magecraft so it doesn't get revealed?" Naruto was incredulous. "Because the Holy Grail chooses to reveal the masters in itself in the city, and because you can only summon it in the city at 1-4 major spiritual ley lines. I guess it's inevitable then," he concluded thoughtfully, "but that doesn't mean I have to like it though." Naruto looked at his left hand and nodded upon noticing the odd mark. "There should be a holy mark on one of your hands, right?" he asked. "The 3 command spells. Those are the symbols of a master. Once every several decades, 7 masters are chosen, and each of the masters is given a servant, so that they fight each other for possession of the Holy Grail. I was chosen as one of the masters as well. As long as you have your command spells, your servant will obey you. They also give you the right to issue absolute orders, meaning you can make them do whatever you want, if it's against their will and honor. I'm sure that they have been abused before, huh? Probably, though it will decrease by 1 every time you use it, so most don't use it for frivolous or selfish means. You only get 3 command spells, so you should only use 2 if you must. If you use all 3, you are no longer a master. You seem to be in an incomplete condition. It can't be that he is incompetent as a magus," she said, turning to face Saber. "Maybe during the fight, the summoning circle was disrupted slightly," Naruto said as he turned after repairing the last of the bullet holes. "That could be possible. It couldn't be that Naruto doesn't have enough power to materialize me because he does. Nevertheless, it's going to be difficult for me to go into spirit form or replenish my own magic power," sighed Saber. Naruto grinned and said, "Don't worry, if you ever need any ask, I got plenty." Saber nodded. But with a sigh, Rin grumbled, "If I were your master none of this would have happened. Oh, I'm perfectly capable. Our fight just interfered with the summoning is all." Rin said arrogantly, "Whatever, let's get going." With a tick mark over his quivering eyebrow, Naruto said, Oi, you gonna tell me where we are going? Tsuneres are so adorable, but they can be a pain at times. We are going to where the supervisor of the war is." Naruto turned to Saber and said, "Let's go, Saber." "Really, a supervisor of a war?" He deadpanned. "What is this, a sports game?" "Ha, whatever, lead the way so I can get this over with." Saber nodded. However, he stopped and glanced at her. As they started to move toward his door, Naruto said, "Hey Saber, do you have clothes other than the armor? We are going to be walking through town and I don't think the armor will work for you." Yes, I see your point. Subtlety would be better for now." At that moment, her body glowed and her armor vanished, revealing her new ensemble, which included a long, sleeved white-collared blouse with a long blue bow tie, a knee-length blue skirt, black leggings, and brown boots. "Nice look, well, lead the way, Rin." "Right." A curious Naruto inquired, "So the supervisor is a priest at Kotomine Church?" Saber told Naruto, "I'll keep an eye on the perimeter." He patted the gun in its holster beneath his jacket and said, "Sure, go ahead. I'll be fine defending myself anyway." Saber nodded. "So Rin, what kind of person is the supervisor?" Naruto asks Rin as they enter the dimly lit church. "Well, he is my technical legal guardian, and he's an apprentice magus senior to me. I guess you can call him my second teacher." Naruto exclaimed incredulously, "The church permits a priest to engage in something as heretical as magecraft and not face consequences." When the man they were looking for finally appeared, Rin said, "That is why you have to be careful with him. His name is Kotomine Kirei, my father's apprentice. I've known him for 10 years, and 10 years too many if you ask me. And I did not want an apprentice that does not respect her teacher," says Kirei. With the exception of growing his shaggy hair out to his shoulders, Kirei hasn't changed much. He still sports a golden cross necklace and a casual priest outfit. When he stops in front of Rin and Naruto with his hands behind his back, Rin tells him, "I brought you the 7th master. He is a capable, if not unorthodox, magus, but the summoning went slightly wrong so I couldn't help but watch out for him." She trailed off. "What is your name?" Kirei asked with a sly smile, bending slightly and putting that information away for later. In a somewhat strained response, Naruto narrowed his eyes and said, "Naruto, Emiya Uzumaki Naruto." That smile really got under his skin. It brought to mind the Kabuto he had dreamed about. "Emiya Uzumaki Naruto," Kirei repeated, looking up at him with veiled surprise. He laughed to himself, remembering his battle with an Emiya a decade earlier. "You're Saber's master, correct?" he asked, savoring the irony. He had to suppress his laughter. "Yes, I suppose so, though could you explain the Holy Grail War in more detail for me? Coming from the supervisor, I should be able to understand it perfectly when we are done." "Of course, this is the first time Rin has relied on me, so giving me my thanks to you is not quite enough. First of all, now that you are a master you cannot quit being one. That command spell is a holy mark that has thrust this ordeal upon you. Are we clear?" Kirei laughed in amusement before responding with that phony smile of his. Naruto simply laughed, "Of course, why would I quit anyway? I'm not so weak that I would quit something because it is unfavorable to me. I would just adapt to the situation until it becomes favorable. Regardless, there are only a couple ways out of this war. Death is the most prominent, but winning the Grail and getting your wish granted is the preferred option," he said with an evil grin. Naruto questioned incredulously, "The Holy Grail grants wishes. How could any magic be so strong that it could fulfill a single wish?" "With the Holy Grail, your wishes can be granted. The filth within you cleanse," he responded by raising his arms. "Yes, you can even start everything all over again. Therefore, covet this chance. If the time comes, you shall be thankful for the fact that you are a master. What if someone abuses its power?" He trailed off with a smile that deeply unnerved Naruto, saying, "I am the supervisor for a reason." He should be very tired of the man in front of him, he thought. "Kirei." With her hands on her hips, Rin interrupted him, saying, "Stop talking in such a roundabout way. All I asked was that you explain the rules to him." "Very well. This battle is called the Holy Grail War. A scramble between 7 masters and 7 servants. We do not voluntarily take part in such killings. It is all a ritual to determine who is the most suitable candidate to obtain the use of the Grail. If you doubt its existence, the presence of these heroic spirits should be all the proof you need." Kirei closed his eyes and turned his head to the side before turning to face Naruto. "The servants are legendary heroes from either the past or the present, given flesh by the Holy Grail. Essentially they stand by their masters in spiritual form, and you can materialize them and have them fight for you when necessary." "Yeah, well, there was a complication with Emiya Kun's saber. Apparently the summoning was interfered and now his servant can't go into spiritual form," she said arrogantly. "This miracle of near resurrection can essentially be called Holy Grail. Having so much power, will be able to grant its possessor infinite power. Before this fact its authenticity holds no value." He laughed. "Though it will only choose one person in the end. The Holy Grail is responsible for everything, be it choosing the 7 masters or summoning the servants. As though delivering a sermon to a crowd, he raised his hands once more and concluded, "This is the Holy Grail War. A spirit descending ritual whereby you are chosen by the Holy Grail and cross swords for its sole possession. Though there isn't a rule that says you have to kill the masters," Rin stated, that made Naruto look at her. "The Holy Grail is a spiritual body. Only servants, who are spiritual entities, can touch it. The war is actually the elimination of all the other servants than your own." He smiled and said to her, "That's nice, I won't have to kill you, Rin. I'm assuming though that because masters have died before, that it is easier to win by killing the masters? The servant won't have a master to give them magic power, yes, though that just means they will try to find another master with command spells, because if they were summoned that means they want the grail for a reason as well. So let me ask you, can you defeat your servant? Servants are very powerful. Not even servants, let alone masters, can defeat each other easily. But without masters, servants cannot exist on their own, making it, as you said, easier to kill the masters." Kirei continued to smirk and said, "Though if you were to use all your command spells, that would just make you an incompetent loser of Omegas. If one were to do that, I would ensure their safety, because that has long been the role of the supervisor throughout the Holy Grail wars that have taken place." In an attempt to appear sincere, he closed his eyes and covered his heart, which made Naruto suppress the urge to roll his eyes. This is now the 5th time the war has taken place in this city. The previous war took place 10 years ago. Naruto casually remarked, "I'm honestly surprised no one has noticed a war taking place 5 times. The people in charge of covering things up are good, huh? Past wars have been nothing but calamitous. Masters motivated by their own desires had forgotten what they had learned as magicians, and began doing nothing but killing each other indiscriminately. Therefore from the 3rd Holy Grail War onwards, the association sent in a supervisor. That was my father." With his back turned, he raised his hands once more toward the ceiling. "I am succeeding his duties." Naruto's eyes narrowed in anger as he said firmly, "With all due respect, this is one fucked up ritual." "Oh?" Kirei asked, looking amusedly at Naruto. "First off, you have 7 potentially dangerous and powerful magicians, and you have incredibly powerful servants fighting in the middle of a city. You are endangering innocence and risking magecraft being known worldwide. Second, what if the grail falls into the wrong hands and causes destruction? Don't you think an omnipotent wish granter is a bad thing for someone who has no problem killing people and endangering innocence to have?" said an irritated Naruto. "Regardless of what type of personality ends up possessing the grail, the Magicians Association will not intervene. All we regulate are the rules. If you don't like it, win yourself. A much better method than relying on others, yes? Wouldn't you want to prevent what happened 10 years ago?" Kirei questioned. Naruto narrowed his eyes as Kirei continued, "At the end of the previous war, an unsuitable person touched the Holy Grail. We don't know what that master's desire was. The only thing we do know is the mark left behind by that disaster." At Naruto's wide-eyed look, Kirei smirked and continued, "That's right, the large fire with an unknown cause was a result of the last Holy Grail War." "What's wrong, Emiya-kun?" asked a concerned Rin at seeing his troubled face for a split second before he went stoic. "It's fine, don't worry. So what happened after? What was the result?" "There was none. Like I said, an unsuitable person touched the grail. Another person touched the grail before that too. However, that man kept evading battles, and the Holy Grail could not be completed. Once all 7 servants are present, the Holy Grail will appear by itself once enough time has passed by. But the Grail did not acknowledge the man who kept running from battles as its possessor," Kirei answered. Rin continued, "In other words, even if you obtain the Holy Grail without fighting the other masters, it will be meaningless, right? The master that got the Grail first was just a naive person." "You were that master, huh?" Naruto grinned at Kirei when he remained silent. "To a certain point." With a simple eyebrow raise, Naruto asked, "To a certain point? I lost my servant and was protected by my father who was the supervisor. This is the end of our conversation." Naruto thought, apparently, he is still sore about it. The only people who are allowed to obtain the Grail are the masters who have control of their servants. When the last of the masters is left, the Grail will appear before the winner. "So then, Emiya Uzumaki Naruto, do you have the will to fight in this war?" Naruto had an unreadable expression on his face, and his eyes were shadowed. Kirei gave him a questioning glance before Naruto's head raised to reveal his resolute expression and his almost glowing eyes, which were full of strength and resolve. He nearly took a step back in shock. Nearly. His backbone is stronger than that. "Don't underestimate me. I will fight, and I will win, if nothing else to protect others in case it falls into the wrong hands." Rin was initially surprised, but then she grinned and started to head for the door, saying, "Then it's settled, let's go back now." "Rejoice, young man." Your wish will finally be granted. Without a clear presence of evil, your wish cannot be granted. Even if it is something you can't accept, there is a need for evil to oppose justice. Kirei said in a booming voice to Naruto's back as he turned to walk with Rin. Naruto turned to face Kirei, his eyes narrowed. Your most noble wishes, and your most disgraceful desires hold the same meaning. But don't worry, you don't need to amend them. The dilemma you possess is righteous for a human. Keep telling yourself that. Naruto simply sneered and turned to leave, adding, I'm sure that speech helps you sleep at night. Kirei clenched his teeth, furious at the blonde adolescent for what he had said, as Naruto exited the church and shut the door. He would like to murder him. But not yet, he still needs to finish the battle from the previous conflict, and it should be okay to replace the deceased Emiya with another one. Good luck Emiya Uzumaki Naruto, I look forward to the finale. Later, as they were traveling to their individual residences, Rin said, I have finished my duties for now. She blushed and struck the third Tsunere pose as he smiled warmly and said, yeah, thanks for helping me so much today, Rin. You not only saved my life, but you helped me understand my situation. Thank you. Why? Yay. Yeah, well, I won't go easy on you even if you flatter me, she yelled. On the side, Saber saw a servant and master approaching them. Naruto, she exclaimed as they came into view. After turning to face Saber, he turned to see where she was looking, and the monstrous man looming over the laughing little girl from yesterday was approaching them. He is over 8 feet tall, with a well-defined, muscular body, long, wild black hair, dark gray skin, and pale yellow eyes, though his left eye is always shining with a red or yellow glow. Despite wearing a Greek tunic and belt covered in leather with metal plates sewn on, he is bare-chested and footed. Additionally, he has Greek metal bracers on his ankles and wrists. In addition, he has odd protuberances emerging from his forearms. Finally, he has a huge club, axe, and sword. Her cheerful tone was betrayed by the dark expression on her joyful face as she said, Good evening. She curtsied. This is the second time we met. Rin worriedly said, This isn't good, this servant's power is incomparable. Pleased to meet you, Rin, she curtsied again. I am Ilya, Ilyasviel von Einsborn, understand? Einsborn. Rin trailed off with a bead of sweat rolling down her forehead. She smiled slightly and remarked, I don't think any more salutations are necessary, since you'll all be dying here. Alright, I'll be killing you now. Do it, berserker. The enormous, hideous man jumped into the air. Roaring, he brought his weapon to bear on it. Naruto, stay back. Saber yelled as she dashed forward, bringing forth her armor and invisible sword. Saber. Naruto exclaimed, his voice full of surprise. People telling him what to do in a fight was something he wasn't used to. Now, however, he was not going to hold back. As he battled Saber, this man appeared tough but unintelligent. For this one, he may need to get all the tools out of the woodworking. He is handling that huge sword, like a toy, Rin remarked with a worried frown after witnessing Berserker counter Saber's skillful swordplay with brute strength and raw yet unrefined speed. However, Ilya's joyful cries for Berserker to go gave the impression that she was enjoying herself. In order to gain a better position to attack Berserker, Saber used her exceptional agility to run up the nearby telephone poles and wires, but he wouldn't make it easy. She was running on wires, and he quickly caught up to her and cut them. However, Naruto was impressed by Saber's grace and agility, which brought to mind the ninja of his former self and their chakra, powered tree and water walking. Saber just leapt from one post to another, landed in front of Ilya, and gazed at her. She was thinking about how much she resembled Irisfield. Even their names were similar, a homunculus, perhaps. Ilya gave her a charming glare as she considered whether or not to question it, but then Berserker appeared and swung his sword at the preoccupied Saber, who barely raised her sword in time, only to be propelled into a pole. Naruto yelled, damn it, as he charged ahead. Now Berserker. Finish her once and for all, she exclaimed excitedly. Saber had to jump and engage in swordplay with Berserker again after he slammed his blade into the ground, creating a tiny crack. However, he shoved her away, and as Saber prepared to fight again, Rin started shooting magic bullets at Berserker, but he survived all of them unscathed. Damn it. His body is absurdly tough, she grumbled. Naruto entered at that point. In an attempt to kill Berserker quickly, he sprinted behind him and brought his jeweled trench knife down toward his cervical vertebrae as he leapt. However, Berserker's heroic spirit isn't for nothing. He turns his elbow and slams it into Naruto, sending him crashing into a wall. Naruto! Exclaimed Rin and Saber. But Ilya was perplexed. Why would a master try to defend and assist his servant in battle? He moaned as he stood up, blood streaming down his brow. Well, fuck, that hurt. There is no way you can win. My berserker is the strongest hero from Greek mythology. That would mean. He is Hercules. Or is it Heracles? Naruto said as he leaned back and shifted his neck, popping and cracking his bones back into place. Rin said, "How can you be so calm right now?" With a casual remark, "Oh, I have taken worse before, besides I heal quickly." He then narrowed his eyes at his opponent. "That's right, he is Heracles. He is incomparable to any servant you could have summoned. He is the most heinous monster." Continue Berserker, finished Saber. "Not so fast, asshole, I'm not done with you yet." Even as Berserker prepared to swing his sword at him, he charged forward. He just ran forward, ignoring Saber and Rin's calls for him. He swiftly moved his trench knife to his left hand, braced himself, and then mumbled as his veins swelled. Time Alter. Square Excel. Saber and Berserker would have been too shocked to react in time, but to Rin and Ilya, it was practically instantaneous. He was moving quickly enough to see. Berserker's legs and the sword both rolled beneath Naruto, who immediately planted his feet and leapt again in the direction of his cervical vertebrae. He wasn't brandishing his knife, though, this time. Rather, he reared back with his right hand open, revealing a basketball-sized sphere of pure prana swirling inside. In that moment, he slammed that swirling destructive orb into the back of Berserker's neck, causing it to grind into him and knock him to his knees. Then, he yelled, causing it to explode outward and push Berserker face down into the ground once more. He shouted, "Rasengan," as the blow's force created a tiny crater all around Berserker's body. Before he gradually began to catch his breath, Naruto was standing hunched on Berserker's back, panting heavily, as the dust and debris from the attack cleared. He moved away from his back and in the direction of Rin and Saber. Their expressions were one of shock and utter disbelief. A servant shouldn't have been subjected to such treatment by a human. Though her thoughts were more along the lines of, "He took one of his lives." Ilya shared similar thoughts. "He won't be able to, though." Naruto continued to approach the astonished pair, taking pleasure in their reaction. "Hey, I know I'm awesome and all, but women shouldn't let their jaws hang open like that, nay?" He was joking. Although Saber's blush was not as noticeable as Rin's, they were suspicious when they noticed that Berserker had not yet vanished and Ilya remained composed. Naruto turned around after noticing their change. He arrived just in time to witness Berserker twitch, then drop to his knees, growling and snapping his neck into position before roaring to his feet. He lunged forward, slashing Naruto with his sword. Despite his best efforts to lean back and avoid it, Naruto was slashed across the chest, which caused him to leap back and land on his knees. With one hand, he applied pressure to the wound while using the other to extract his gray M9. "Naruto!" exclaimed Saber and Rin once more. Even so, Saber confronted Berserker once more as he charged forward with fresh resolve. Rin was attempting to tend to Naruto in the meantime. "Berserker has 12 lives. For each of his 12 labors, you have to defeat him 11 more times if you want to win," said Ilya. However, she still hadn't anticipated this happening. Rin screamed at him, "What in the world were you thinking? I can't save your life every time." After giving her a brief glance, Naruto returned his attention to the back and forth struggle between Saber and Berserker. "Whatever, it's just a scratch and this is a war, right? People get hurt if they fight." She shouted at him once more, "Yeah, but servants are supposed to do the fighting, idiot. What a stubborn guy, really, pot meets kettle." He demanded angrily, "Was I just supposed to stand by here when I can fight?" Rin was taken aback not only by his outburst but also when he stood up once more and removed his school jacket, revealing his black shirt and the leather harness underneath. The gray M9 was in his hands, so the left holster was empty. The pockets were there to hold the extra ammunition clips, and he had the black silenced M9 in the right holster. Additionally, one of the straps above his left holster, close to his heart, has 6 large bullets in its sleeves in a bandolier fashion. The .30.06 caliber of those bullets is 10% more potent than the .308 Winchester rifle bullet and even more potent than the Magnum hand cannon class. They're for a special gun of his, which is in the third holster under the left one that he fastened to the harness before leaving his house. He pulled out the special gun and placed his knife in its extra sheath on his harness while maintaining focus on the battle in front of him. He flicked it up with his hand and cocked it after popping it open to make sure it was loaded. Pointing the sentimental gun at Berserker, he raised it. "Idiot! What can that gun do? My magecraft couldn't affect him. What makes you think that will?" Rin exclaimed in frustration. As he squeezed the trigger, his simple response was, "Because this gun is anything but ordinary." The bullet actually pierced Berserker's chest, where his heart should be, after zooming to its target. When Saber turned to face the source of the shot, She was shocked to see Naruto brandishing a weapon she knew well. He was holding his father's Thompson contender, which was still smoking. There was silence. There was no movement. But all of a sudden, Berserker started to tremble and shake. At last, he let out a painful roar. Ilya was taken aback because Berserker, who typically has a very high pain threshold, had never before admitted his discomfort to this extent. The origin shot. Dad's old mystic code, Naruto thought. Bullets containing the severing and binding characteristics of his origin that are made from his ground up ribs. They really are the worst thing that can happen to a magician. Fortunately, he had extra. Everyone was startled out of their shock when Naruto said, "You should retreat." He concluded in a chilly tone with narrowed eyes, "His mana along with his ability to absorb more has been disrupted severely. Extra lives or not, if you do not recall him to recover, he will die and you will lose." Ilya winces a little, then sighs and exclaims, "Fine, retreat Berserker." Berserker lets out one last roar of agony and disappears. Then, as she turns to leave, Ilya pauses and utters the afterthought, "Next time we will kill you all." Naruto finally holsters his guns as she departs. "Well, I don't know about you two, but I am exhausted. 3 fights in one night and I technically died in one. Oh, fuck me, I'm about to pass out. Let's go home before I do," he says, turning to the 2 girls with a heavy, weary sigh. They nod, and as he leaned down to retrieve his school jacket, he fell forward, saying, "She." Naruto was the final sound he heard before darkness fell. With a desperate and irate expression, Naruto demanded, "What the hell is going on out there?" After giving him a worried glance, Iruka reacted firmly and said, "War, Madara is making his move." Before the Raikage, his Hokage, and Chan, Naruto stood in a yellow flame. Like chakra shroud with many black markings. His fellow Jinchuriki killer B was standing beside him. "I won't let you pass," the Raikage yelled. "Brother, let us pass, Naruto has to whip some ass. I promise to keep an eye on the guy," Killer B rapped. "What are you morons saying? This war is to protect you too, if you two are caught. The enemy's jutsu will be complete. I heard about what they're doing from Iruka, sensei. And you still want to fight? Are you morons? I can't stand by while everybody fights this war for me. If we win at the cost of everyone dying, I'll be the only one left," Naruto screamed angrily. "There's no meaning in that. I won't allow that to happen." The Raikage charged with all of his might and yelled, "I am coming Naruto," as Naruto tried to get past him by charging down as quickly as he could. "I was left too many things to do," Naruto said firmly. The Raikage sped alongside him, his large fist threatening to crush him as his lightning armor crackled, giving him incredible power. Debris and dust exploded from the punch as the Raikage struck. Naruto's unharmed appearance behind him stunned his Chan and fellow Jinchuriki, who compared his speed to that of his father. Turning his back, he uttered, "I won't fail. As you said, Raikage, a savior doesn't make mistakes, so I won't. Exactly like my father. Exactly like I learned from him." "The moon is really beautiful, isn't it?" Kiritsugu said, looking up after a moment of silence and a weary sigh. "Yeah, well, since you couldn't become a hero and my past self was a hero, what kind of guy would I be if I didn't try to be one as well?" Naruto said firmly, humming agreement and nodding absently. Then, the teasing tone stopped as he said firmly, "I'll be the hero for you, the hero you couldn't be. I have to live up to my name, Emiya Uzumaki Naruto, after all," he concluded with a broad smile. Then, with a determined smirk, Naruto continued, "Leave it to me, I'll accomplish both of our dreams." Kiritsugu turned to him in mild surprise. "Yeah, that's a relief," Kiritsugu said, turning back to face the front and exhaling a humorous yet joyful breath. Thus, Emiya Kiritsugu, the renowned Magus killer, passed away at the age of 34. After his dream was passed on to his son, Naruto could only watch as his mentor, teacher, and most importantly, father of 5 years, passed away quietly. As he looked up at him, he was unaware that tears were silently running down his cheeks. With a choked sob, he turned to the moon and attempted to smile. "Yeah, the moon is really beautiful, old man." With a gasp, Naruto emerged from his futon and instantly clutched his head in agony. He noticed that he had bandages wrapped around his chest but was shirtless when he looked down. He kept them on just in case, even though he knew he might be healed by now. He saw Rin sitting down and sipping tea as he entered the living room after getting dressed. "Good morning, Emiya-kun." She smiled and said, "I made myself comfortable without your permission." Why are you here?" Naruto asked, staring at her incredulously. She made a fake angry face and said, "Man, you should get better tea here, even the tea bags." get some of the triangular packs at least. But why are? With a sweet smile that threatened to hurt him if he didn't comply, she interrupted him by raising her hand and saying, "Hold it. First, express your gratitude for carrying you all the way here." After raising an eyebrow, Naruto recalled that he had fainted from exhaustion following the long night. He bumped his fist into an open palm and said, "Oh, that's right, I passed out from exhaustion. When we were wrapping your slash from Berserker, it was already healing by itself. My guess is that since Saber has the ability to regenerate, the ability must have passed onto you." Naruto simply waved her away and began using his pinky to pick at his ear before stating, "Nah, I have always healed that fast." Rin wrinkled her nose in disgust as he wiped his pinky on a nearby napkin before she realized what he had said. She cried in shock, "What? You have always regenerated like that?" "Yeah, is that so hard to believe?" "Yes. Well, I do." He pouted and crossed his arms. "Well, we have an impossible master. For a master to go out and fight with his servant. That's unheard of. If you die, Saber would disappear too, right? Whatever you saw what I did yesterday, I have the skills to at least fight with her and damage, if not kill servants. I may not be overpowering, but I am definitely surprising. And with everyone underestimating me and Saber and you by my side, we can't lose." Naruto replied with a smirk. Rin asked, "What are your plans from now on, Emiya-kun?" After blushing a little but gathering herself. He laughed bitterly before saying, "Honestly, I'm not sure I have a wish. Maybe to end this stupid war. I just don't want what happened 10 years ago to happen again." "I thought you'd say something like that. Look, servants don't serve the master gratuitously, they have wishes as well. They get summoned by the Grail because they want to obtain their Grail. So how do you think Saber will feel if her master doesn't really have a wish?" Sighing, Naruto remarked, "She would probably be upset." "Yes, she would be upset. Look, if you just sit here thinking about what you could do, you let the other masters do what they want and innocent people will die." Rin said incredulously to Naruto. She went on, "A servant's fuel is mana. The more mana they stock, the more abilities they can use from their former lives." With furrowed brows, Naruto questioned, "What are you saying?" "Because they are spiritual bodies, if they eat our souls, they can gain nutrition from us." Rin sighed. "This means that there will be masters who will use their servants to assault humans and eat their souls to replenish their mana." Naruto exclaimed in shock, "What? It was simply too much. Attacking civilians to extract their souls in order to gain more power. So what will you do? Are you just going to watch and stand by letting the other masters do what they want?" Naruto gritted his teeth and said, "I'll stop them then." As she made more tea and served it to Naruto, she narrowed her eyes and said, "I give up. You won't go out and attack masters of your own will, but when they are doing some bad deeds you will go fight them. You are contradicting yourself. Look, I'm still new to this, so I don't really have another plan, alright? But I'm not gonna sit here and drink tea if I know innocent lives are in danger." "So you are going to be reactionary? That is stupid. That master from last night will come to find and kill us. Do you want to be caught off guard?" "Of course not. Look, you have to figure this out, we aren't on the same team, remember?" "Yeah." Naruto was waiting for Rin at the door as she left his house. As she put on her shoes, she casually looked up at him and said, "You know you don't have to see me out." He smiled warmly and concluded, "So thank you for helping get home, Rin. I really appreciate it." "Yeah, I know. But I wanted to," he said, making her look up at him with a slight flush. "I never did thank you, by the way. Look, from now on, it's better you don't see me as human anymore," she said with a serious expression as she turned away and started to leave. Naruto closed his eyes and sighed as she shut the door, thinking, "Tsuneres. I must thus defeat all of the war's masters." He sighed and started to leave, saying, "It will be inevitable before innocent people become involved because of last night's battle and what Rin just told me. Anyway, I will try my best to protect not just the innocents, but my precious people." He concluded resolutely, considering his Taiga.ne, Sakura, even Saber, and a little Rin. "I should check on Saber." When Naruto finally made the decision to check the dojo after looking all over the house for Saber, he discovered her sitting on her knees in the far corner with her eyes closed. Simply the pinnacle of elegant grace. She opened her eyes and got to her feet when Naruto approached her and stood a few feet away. "I see you have awakened." "Yeah, just recently." After entering his private area, she said, "You do not look well." "Well, I just woke up and I'm not really a morning person. But I'm fine now," he concluded, grinning. "Not to mention the dreams I had." "I see. Then I will advise you on your actions last night." He grumbled, "What, not you too?" In response, before he realized what she was saying, Naruto narrowed his eyes at her and blinked, recalling the Shikamaru from his dreams who would always say, It is troublesome for a master to take such actions. Combat is my domain of expertise, and you must carry out your own role. There is no necessity for a master to fight with his servant, and there is neither a reason to do so, she said with determination. Now listen here, combat is my domain of expertise. I have been fighting since I was 11, and training before that. Don't you tell me not to fight, and just because it isn't a necessity, doesn't mean it isn't impossible or illegal. Naruto yelled angrily, causing her eyes. Naruto dislikes being told not to fight when he is capable of doing so. He yelled angrily, and if I need to prove it to you that I can fight with you, and I can win with you even after last night, then something is wrong with that head of yours, Arturia. Her eyes widened even more as she recalled his actions from the previous night and the fact that he had used her real name. Arturia, I trust you. Even though it's been a day, I trust you. Can you trust me? He said after taking a deep breath and sighing. Saber sighed and closed her eyes. You seem honorable so far in your want to defend the innocent, and you genuinely wish to fight alongside me. And to do that effectively we do need to trust each other. So yes, I will trust you. After grinning, Naruto extended his hand to shake hers. So partners? With a smile on her face, she took his hand and said, yes, partners. He raised his other fist and declared, all right, we will win this war together. Throughout the dojo, a loud rumble reverberated, humorously shaking the windows. With a tiny drop of perspiration on his stomach, Naruto said, maybe we should have breakfast first. Saber appeared composed despite a slight flush. Empty stomachs are our enemies. Let us eat, Naruto. Before they left the dojo and headed for the kitchen, Naruto simply started to perspire more after hearing her response. Without looking at Naruto, Saber asked, what is the matter, Naruto? I was just wondering, with you being from Britain, are you okay with Japanese dishes for breakfast? Naruto said, grinning sheepishly and scratching his head. Yes. As long as you can eat it, I do not mind. Extravagance is our enemy. Dropping his perspiration, Naruto said, we got a lot of enemies, don't we? Perhaps, Naruto simply made a face fault. In his shop, Naruto was tinkering with his weapons while reflecting on the previous battle. He foolishly underestimated a heroic spirit, and he hated himself for it. At the very least, he ought to be dead or gravely injured. He turned to look at his hands when he heard an ungainly metallic cracking sound. He chipped the kunai he was sharpening because he was clenching them so tightly in rage. He leaned back in his chair after taking a deep breath to help him relax. I need to prepare myself better. He thought resolutely, I can't relax anywhere, I won't be caught off guard and fight on my enemy's terms again. After giving it some thought, he leaned forward and resumed his work. He needed to return to his specialty, being erratic. Who said he had to fight fairly, after all? He looked to a specific file cabinet that contained a variety of projects, theories, and methods for developing new methods and altering existing ones. He took out a few files after opening it. He looked at the project titles and then grinned slyly. After working on his weapons in his shop, Naruto was getting ready for school when he realized he had a new and unexpected guest. He has no idea how she got here. Knowing that his taiga.ne would exaggerate it, he let out a mental groan. But he shouldn't just keep her hidden. In any case, how do you conceal someone from someone like her? He should probably finish the introductions. He doesn't need the drama until after school, though, so not right now. He then proceeded to the location where he knew Saber was after putting his trench knife on the sheath above his left ankle, packing his backpack with his Mystic Code Grey M9, the black silenced M9, his harness, extra ammunition, a flashbang, a frag, and 3 pouches filled with kunai and pockets concealed within it. He discovered her in her room and informed her of the problem. Yeah, so since Sakura, Chan and Taiga.ne aren't magicians, until we can think of a suitable cover when I come back from school, can you stay here? Asked Naruto with a smile. You mean hide? Asked the stoic Saber. That makes me sound like a douche somehow, I know it. But yeah, in a sense. You won't have to hide long, just until I get back from school when we can think of a suitable cover. Just not right now. If we do, we will probably think of some hastily thought idea that will be easily seen through. And I really don't want drama so early in the morning from Taiga.ne, replied a frustrated Naruto. Sakura called from the other side of the house, Senpai, your breakfast will get cold. Naruto turned back to Saber and said, I'm coming, so just stay here until I get back, okay? There's food in the fridge if you want, just wait until we leave. She said stoically, I understand, I will wait here until your return, once more. As he left the room, Naruto thought, that stoic face and agreement really isn't making me feel good about this. An hour before sunset, Naruto returned home from yet another dull day of school. He entered his home and went to Saber's room so they could discuss what they would say to the people who often visited her. She was in her futon, eyes closed, but tense as if expecting movement, when he opened the door to her room. She sleeps lightly, then. The majority of fighters are, Naruto thought absently. Ready to talk? Naruto asked Saber as she opened her eyes after he sat down. Yes, master. I twitch. Why? Yeah, well, it will only be a matter of time before either Sakura, Chan or most likely Taiga.ne discover your presence, so we should think of a believable cover for you. Such as a bodyguard. Naruto didn't notice the tiny twitch Saber made when he mentioned paying back a debt to his father. That could work. I guess we can say you are repaying a debt to my dad or keeping a promise. Okay, it's settled, you are my bodyguard until further notice due to a promise to my dad either you or your parents made. Your prerogative on that one. Naruto said with a nod. So what were you doing all day, Saber? I was sleeping. With an eyebrow raised, Naruto questioned, really, for that long? Once more, she stated stoically, yes, it is better that I sleep as much as possible outside of combat to preserve my prana. Someone is coming by the way. Taiga.ne and Sakura. Chan most likely. He smiled and extended a hand to Saber, who accepted it despite being perplexed. Good thing we came up with that cover, come on, he said. They heard Sakura and Taiga talking as they made their way to the kitchen, where it seemed that they had already set the table and, judging from Taiga's excited cries, dinner had already been served. Sakura. Chan, at last, you're taking cooking seriously. Naruto sensed the joyful grin on her face. Naruto could sense the shy, gentle smile on her face as well. Thank you for the compliment. I can't guarantee the taste though, she said. What are you discussing? Something this attractive cannot possibly taste bad. As they continued toward the dining room, Naruto turned to face Saber and said, Hey Saber, come eat with us, I'm sure you haven't eaten all day. With a startled expression, Saber said, I should be fine with, before becoming stoic once more. Not hearing any of it, Naruto interrupted, grabbing her hand and pulling her into the dining room, where she saw faces that appeared too shocked to move, at first happy, then surprised, then confused. Sakura was a complete statue, and Taiga was already beginning to eat, with a piece of food on the verge of entering her mouth, but it fell in her lap in shock. Hey everyone, I apologize for not introducing you two to her earlier, she arrived right after I got home from school. I was assisting her in settling in. This is Saber, she will be staying here for a while as my bodyguard, Naruto said as casually as he could, but deep down he was terrified because Sakura was twitching above her eye and Taiga was creeping closer to her bakken. In fact, Saber sounded uncertain about the situation they had wandered into when he said, Naruto. Saber, please take a seat. Eating with everyone is preferable, don't you think? With a false sense of assurance, Naruto said. Yes, that is more efficient, but don't be so shy, Naruto said, closing his eyes as he sat down at the table. I take it that you will be residing here? By the way, Taiga.ne, each person will receive 6 meatballs. At that moment, Mount Tiger, Fujimura erupted, yelling angrily, I shall not allow this, as she turned to Saber, her white eyes and tiger-like teeth roaring behind her. When the adorable tiger transformed into the bloodthirsty one used for disciplining Naruto, it didn't take long for Naruto to cover his ears and curl up in silence in preparation for the beating he would eventually receive. Taiga turned to face Naruto and uttered the words in a menacing tone, Naruto. How on earth did you end up bringing such a foreign girl? This isn't a lodging establishment. All right. As the tiger behind her licked the saliva dripping from its teeth, she concluded her glare at him. It's all right. When he eventually plucked up the courage to confront the malevolent apparition in front of him, he said, it's as large as some hotels. In addition to being my bodyguard, 1 or 2 people won't harm me. However, Taiga didn't actually hear the final line, 1 or 2 people. Her demonic look returned with a vengeance as she slowly began pulling her bakken out from behind her back and said in a deceptively sweet smile and voice, Naruto. Don't tell me you're hiding anything else. And by staring at him with a dejected, surprised, and disappointed expression while holding her face in her hands, Sakura fanned the flames by asking, Senpai, is that true? Hey, do you really think so little of me? Why do we have such vivid imaginations? Don't make it sound like I'm a kidnapper, Naruto yelled angrily. Sakura's voice was uncertain as she said, but, in addition, what is her hometown? Taiga demanded. He started to say, she is from Britain, but the women cut him off once more. From the United Kingdom, Taiga remarked, seemingly amused by the alleged justification. Sakura seemed to agree with her, saying, that is hard to believe. Hey, where is the love and trust? As promised to my father, she is here, hunched over in defeat. Naruto cried out, anime tears streaming down his cheeks. Like I'm gonna believe that crap you just spewed off the spot, declared an irate Taiga. Besides, it's not like Kiritsugu-san had any foreign friends. Well, maybe he did, she finished, trailing off unsure. Right, so. Even so, this is suspicious, she declared as she got right in his face. She then turned to the silent Saber and questioned angrily, "Hey you, what are you here for?" Naruto opened his mouth to respond, but before he could do so, Taiga gave him the death glare with her red demonic eyes and said, "Naruto, shut up." In a fake calm voice, she said, "Naruto, shut up." Naruto quickly closed his mouth in fear, wondering why this wasn't going the way he wanted it to. Then, with a silent sigh of relief, she lifted her glare at Naruto and looked up expectantly at Saber, who merely gave her a cool glance and responded stoically, "I am just abiding by Kiritsugu's words. To protect Naruto from any and all enemies." This, of course, wilted Taiga's resolve in the matter visibly, before she gathered it once more and said confidently, standing up with her hands on her hips, "All right. If you are going to go that far, I want to see how good you are." "You aren't gonna." She interrupted Naruto though by saying confidently with her cute angry face, "That's right." "How? Excellent. You are." She accentuated her words by raising her bicep and tapping it with her hand with each word. She also had her comically angry eyes and voice on. Though Naruto did wonder why no one but him gets the actual demonic and angry faces and voices. Plus that damn bloodthirsty tiger. He never gets the cute one directed at him, it's always the scary ones. Meanwhile, Sakura sweat dropped watching the emotions on Naruto's face ranging from confusion to anger to fear to depression. Taiga decided to settle the score in the dojo with her kendo skills. This would have been a good idea against anyone but Saber. She is specialized in swordplay. So while Naruto sits cross-legged on the floor with Sakura and Caesar next to him, Taiga stands before Saber in the middle of the dojo confidently. With her bakken in hand, she says, "I will allow you to stay if you are stronger than me. If not, I shall have you go home, okay?" She responds, "That sounds acceptable, but I do not understand your logic," as Saber stands in front of her so stoically that she almost seems bored. "You don't understand? As they say, lions leave their young at the bottom of a ravine," she answered back an annoyed Taiga. "This ridiculous," Naruto said with a facepalm. Naruto then felt really cold. He looked up and nearly had a heart attack. He saw Taiga looking at him with her eyes shadowed and glowing red with the bloodthirsty tiger behind her licking blood and drool off its fangs looking at him. She was also stroking her bakken and deceptively smiling at him happily. She said in a sickly sweet voice to him, "I said shut up, Naruto." Then he squeezed out a, "Hi. Besides, we're doing all this just for you, right?" Saber then once again stoically said, "I understand. Basically, I have to persuade you." Taiga just raised her fist with a tick mark above her eyebrow and said angrily, "What? Why do you sound so confident? Just you watch, it going to be hard to convince me." With a final battle cry, she raised her bakken to strike the air. Sakura was frightened of her worried whisper of, "Sensei," and her hands moved to the front of her mouth in anticipation. With a quick glance, Naruto saw Saber flex her right hand in readiness. "Ha!" With a cry, Taiga swung her bakken down, but she noticed that Saber was no longer in front of her and that her hands felt extremely light. She looked down to see that she no longer had the bakken in her hands, and she turned around to see that Saber had the bakken in her grasp. Naruto simply grinned uneasily, while Sakura appeared more concerned because she didn't want any more competition for Naruto's heart. Saber said simply, "Have I convinced you now? Don't assume you've won just like that," Taiga yelled as she slowly turned to face Saber and suddenly pulled a second bakken behind her back. While the bakken in Saber's hands poofed into a cheap, colorful bouquet you typically see in magic shows, she let out another battle cry and charged towards Saber, briefly confusing him. However, Taiga swung down her bakken once more and yelled, "I won." Only to notice that she lost her bakken again. She turned around with a comical shocked face to see Saber with her bakken in her other hand. She could only utter softly, "Huh. I can go on if you wish to continue, but there should be no need to do so," Saber said, dropping the bouquet and clinging to the second bakken she had taken. Taiga, as dramatic as ever, moaned softly as she swayed slowly to her knees, anime tears streaming down her face, whimpering before yelling, "Naruto got taken away from me by some weirdo." She then approached the still shocked Taiga and tapped her on the head with the bakken. "What do you mean, weirdo?" mumbled Naruto, face palming once more. It was time for bed after that show, but Taiga and Sakura made the decision to stay overnight to make sure he and Saber didn't do anything, and they persuaded Saber to sleep between them even though she wanted to sleep in the same room as Naruto to keep him safe as her bodyguard. Taiga refused to move, and at Naruto's insistence, she reluctantly agreed, However, when she asked Naruto, who she understood their conversation about earlier in the day before dinner, why he introduced her to everyone, he simply replied, "I felt like it," and went to his room. Itadakimasu. The four of them are eating a rather substantial breakfast before heading to school in the morning, thanks to the combined efforts of Naruto and Sakura. Taiga remarks, "Nay, Saber. Chan, for a foreigner, you were pretty good at handling chopsticks." She continued to eat stoically and replied, "Yes, I am used to it." However, Taiga noticed that she was going to eat tofu without sauce, so she grabbed the sauce and gave it to her, saying, "Ah, that's sauce." It appears that they were able to forgive each other. She smiled and said, "This is what you should put on tofu." "I see," Saber says with a grateful smile, "I appreciate your advice." Taiga takes her own bowl as Saber pours it and starts to eat it, and when she asks Naruto to refill it for her, he jokes, "Don't fall asleep later because you ate too much. I'll be alright." And, even Sakura Chan eats onigiri after morning practice. She adds in a playful tone, "Because if I don't eat this much, I won't be able to last until noon." Startled, the girl looks up and exclaims, "Why, you knew?" As he scooped up more rice for Taiga, Naruto couldn't resist joining in on the joke, stating, "A lot of strawberries have been used lately so." At this realization, Sakura's face started to flush slightly. Senpai, even you? Then, embarrassed, she turned her head away from everyone. "Here's your bowl, Taiga." However, Saber chose to interrupt and inadvertently make fun of Sakura by asking, "Sakura, do you always think about food?" Sakura unexpectedly widened her eyes, leaned back in surprise, and exclaimed, "Oh, of course not," as Naruto choked on his food. Her face was now flushed. She quickly reached for the remote and turned on the television in an attempt to change the topic. After that, the news reported a incident in which 50 people were discovered, but the alarm was never sounded. "I know that some master is out there doing this, but why?" thought Naruto, who was maintaining his composure in spite of his rage. After breakfast, Naruto and Saber were washing dishes together when Sakura and Taiga made the decision to leave, telling him to put the futons away because they felt that after a talk with Saber, no mistakes would be made. Naruto left for school shortly after, and after reassuring her that he would be able to handle a fight and escape, he also promised to return before sunset. However, she did say that he would summon her with a command spell if things got out of hand, to which he complied. It was even harder to maintain composure when Naruto felt the barrier as he entered the school grounds, barely controlling the flinch his body longed to express, but he managed to keep his composure and continued walking, knowing he was being watched. Naruto felt a faint prana signature nearby, as if someone was trying to suppress it. He tried his best to ignore it, as if he had no idea they were there so as not to raise suspicion. He saw Rin strolling down the same hallway as he was searching for more anomalies. He acknowledged her by nodding his head and said, "Rin." However, an irate Rin ignored him. He could hear her whispering to herself, but he was unable to understand what she was saying, even though he thought he heard a fool being mumbled. Naruto had the mind of a ninja, so it wasn't too difficult for him to blend in and overhear conversations about Mato Shinji's absence and that archery club captain Mitsuzuri Ayako going missing for a day. Apparently, though, she was last seen with the Shinji guy. As he continued to walk absently, he noticed a nearby presence and saw Rin at the top of a flight of stairs, looking down at him with a deceptively calm look. "Rince. It's good to see you again." As he quietly tensed his muscles in preparation for movement and thumbed his backpack in preparation for accessing its contents, Naruto calmly said to her, "Or not if your silence is anything to go by." He could sense her intent gradually growing. "Emiya-kun. Are you aware of how foolish you are?" As she descended the stairs, she said. "Well, it's really difficult to say. I frequently get called an idiot by Taiga.ne or, more recently, you as a joke or insult." He responded, "But many times I have been told I am a lot smarter than I look and act," in a tone that was obviously fake and cheerful, as though he was truly thinking about her question. Naturally, this made Rin's eyebrows twitch slightly, but it went away as she collected herself. She rolled up her left sleeve to her elbow and said, "Gosh, it makes me so angry seeing such foolishness before me." Her irritated, angry expression returned. For a master to walk around idly without his servant, that's like saying, "Please kill me." However, Naruto simply tensed his muscles more and remained silent while considering his next move. The light blue glowing lines traced all around her forearm, and she raised it up, saying, "It's a good thing no one is around right now. Emiya.kun. You can run, but it will just be more painful for you, because I will be the victor in the end either way." With a chuckle, Naruto thought, "I think she forgot about my little demonstration last night." She went on, "Though, it's my policy to not let a chance pass me by. Despite her progress, Naruto still hasn't even moved a single facial muscle from his initial composed Fa section aid, which was secretly unsettling to her. At last, she pointed at him and said, "Do you know about the Scandinavian curse spell called Gando Shot? It basically makes someone's condition worse with just 1 point." Then Naruto closed his eyes and dropped a small object from his sleeve, and as soon as it hit the ground, a huge plume of smoke filled Rin's vision. A smoke pellet? She thought in shock, and when the smoke cleared for her, he was gone. She then tried to track his signature, but it was challenging because he was doing a good job of suppressing it. Rin followed the signature to the opposite side of the school, which was darker because the sun wasn't shining on the windows, and she suddenly felt uneasy about it. The signature was hard to follow because it was flooding the area from all sides, not because it was somehow suppressed. She couldn't tell where he was or where he might be coming from. Rin then started to dart her eyes around, trying to catch a glimpse of anything. After hearing a faint thump to her right, she turned to face it but saw nothing. Then she heard it again, but this time it was behind her. She heard nothing, so she fired 4 magic shots at the 4 directions where she heard the noises, but all she heard was the impact of a wall, door, or locker. No pained grunts or anything. She was definitely nervous now. She barely had time to widen her eyes before she was imprisoned in a square, gray-blue barrier that seemed to ripple and emit a faint hum, anchored at the corners by knives. Suddenly, 4 spots around her started to glow a dull blue. She was surrounded by a barrier that illuminated the hallway, revealing the culprit casually leaning against the wall directly in front of her with his hands in his pockets. He did, however, have some extra accessories, like his trench knife in a sheath attached to his harness on the right side of his chest, 2 pouches on either side of his thighs, and 1 on his lower back, and his jacket was open, partially exposing his leather harness and the guns holstered in it. He kept the same expression she had last seen on him, and even his eyes were still closed. At last, he opened his eyes, approached her, stopped in front of the barrier, and spoke calmly to her, saying, "So Rin, I thought you were going to be the victor?" "This barrier is special," Rin said, gritting her teeth in frustration and firing multiple shots at it without success. "It is surrounded by high, speed-cutting winds on top of a typical barrier." Rin was hesitant to use her gems on the barrier because she wasn't ready for this type of barrier, and Naruto calmly reiterated, "Almost anything that will come in contact with it will be shredded instantly." Naruto then showed this by pulling a pencil from his pocket and hurling it at the barrier, only to watch it grind and shred into dust in a matter of seconds. A scream echoed through the school, stopping any further thought or action. They both turned to face the sound and then back to each other. Rin said, "We have to check that out, Naruto." Warily, Naruto nodded and let go of Rin, then followed her to the source, where they discovered a female student unconscious on the floor, but they could both sense that her mana had been drained from her. They exchanged glances and nodded, though Naruto did ask, "Rin, could you look after her? I'm not very good at healing." She said, "Of course, I should be able to handle this." Then she knelt next to her and started working, closing her eyes, holding a red gem over the girl, and muttering different phrases. "I can't concentrate, can you please close that door?" Rin was understandably shocked, but she was almost killed without even realizing it. Naruto simply rolled his eyes and complied with the demand, only to feel a burst of killing intent focused on Rin. He reacted immediately, pulling out his trench knife and deflecting away some nail-looking stake thing. It faded away almost immediately from where it landed. Emiya.kun. No need to paint an obvious target running around like a fool in the open. Naruto gave her no time to argue as he ran out of the school, staying in the shadows and saying, "Rin, finish healing her." He started to sense the familiar intent in the watcher from the morning as he snuck around the courtyard toward the archery dojo. If he was correct, they were the same person, most likely a servant if that strange weapon was any indication. Like his former self, he moved stealthily into the woods and climbed into the trees, hopping from branch to branch in the darkness. As he was moving, he stopped perching on a branch when he saw a figure hiding behind a tree. Poorly. He is most likely the master of the local stalker. The servant was faster than Naruto, so he had to use his senses to catch his movement as he landed on the ground and then rolled back into the shadows to blend in. Naruto had to jump off the branch he was on to avoid another attack from a stake, this time in the form of a slash, and he suffered a cut across his bicep for his troubles. After taking a deep breath, Naruto took out his gray M9 and held it in his CQC stance. Once again, Snake MGS4. He closed his eyes to concentrate his senses and felt the servant's signature literally flying, zooming, all over the small forest around him. It's nearly impossible to predict the movements until the last second, so he had to roll out of his cover and deflect another strike from the flying stake. He then fell into a crouch and pointed his weapon at the servant in front of him. The servant was not particularly noticeable in the darkness, but he could tell that she was a woman, a curvy woman with long hair that falls to her feet. He paused before firing at her, but she was able to avoid him and blend in with the trees just as easily as he did. As a result, all of his missed shots caused significant damage to the trees with his wind bullets. I'm not out of this fight yet, but I don't want to resort to my project just yet. I have to figure this out. She isn't just going to let me summon Saber either, so I have to make do for now. Naruto thought as he positioned his back closer to a tree to remove at least one blind spot. She can find me easily no matter where I blend in, not to mention she is blindingly fast. He heard chains snap, and when he looked up, he saw the woman swooping down on him like an eagle, her stakes being her talons, and he ducked her blows, though not before getting a few scratches. Yeah, I'm so over this. He put his trench knife away, reached into his right pouch, and, with his M9 in his left hand pointing forward, retrieved 4 kunai, the odd one with the red jewels in the middle of the ringa, and clamped them between his fingers before closing his eyes to refocus his senses. He was startled to hear a rather seductive voice coming from everywhere. Are you not going to employ a command spell? Before responding, Naruto thought, you must think I am stupid to give you an opening like that. Great voice projection. I hope she doesn't do the 8 vital points speech as well. As soon as I concentrated on the command spells, you would exploit me and use your incredible speed to eliminate me right away. In any case, that's what I would do. Fufufu, is that so? You may regret it, trying to act tough. It's hard to take a servant less master seriously, even if you are better than most. I shall alter my methods then. I will kill you gently. He deadpanned back, well, how kind of you. Then, sensing her intention to kill, Naruto turned to face the location where she had just fallen. There, just as she was getting ready to land, he launched the kunai in her direction. When she looked up, she saw 4 knives flying in her direction, but not at her. None of them will touch her, even though it looked like they were going to fly right by her. Then, as soon as they were close to her, they exploded violently with the force of a combined frag and incendiary grenade, combining the searing flames of an incendiary with the concussive explosion of frag. She was obviously taken by surprise. She wasn't a servant, though, for no reason. Although it hurt a lot, she is not seriously hurt. Under her visor, she scowled at the blonde-haired master's previous position. She sensed his attempt to get out of the woods. Funny. However, he irritated her, so she is now completing the task she began. In keeping with her class, she sped off to stop him. She discovered him using the terrain to his advantage as he ran elegantly through the darkness. To be honest, she was impressed by this master. He was competent and good, not like hers. While running through the forest, Naruto heard a sound that was beginning to irritate him. Rustling chains. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the owner holding the second stake, poised to kill him, while the first was flying at him. His eyes narrowed, and he muttered as his veins started to swell. Time alter. Triple Excel. In mid-sprint, Naruto jumped forward and twisted in mid-air to avoid the first stake. He also used the momentum of his twist to launch the 4 explosive kunai he had grabbed in his hand at the female servant, causing time to slow down for him. He grabbed his trench knife and charged it with prana using the speed boost he had been given. After firing a heen after the kunai, he eventually started firing his gray M9 at her. The attack that was directly aimed at Ryder caused her eyes to enlarge beneath her visor. She might actually die if she didn't move out of the way. Even though those explosives were terrible, she will undoubtedly die from the subsequent attacks. There was a huge explosion that blinded everyone. During the attack, the nearby trees burst into splinters and stumps. After completing all of that in 3 seconds, Naruto returned to his typical speed. Following his brief acrobatic maneuver, he rolled safely and gazed expectantly at the smoke cloud while keeping his M9 fixed on it. No one was visible when the cloud lifted. Blood splotches on the ground and bark were the only signs of any presence. Given the situation, it wasn't as much as he would have preferred, but he made her back off so he could no longer sense her presence. Just as Rin arrived, Naruto sat on his haunches, exhausted, and let out a sigh of relief. Her tone was almost worried as she asked, "What happened? There were so many explosions. Who was it?" "That was definitely a servant. No doubt, she was tough, and I'm sure she didn't use her full power on me. She was so fast," he replied tiredly. "And the master? I thought I saw him, but I couldn't get a good look at the figure." "I see. I was aware there were other masters at the school, but..." "Yeah, I figured as much myself. Between that barrier and the fact that the servant was spying on us in the school grounds," sighed Naruto. "By the way, I'm assuming that since you made it here, the girl is fine?" "Don't worry, I managed to keep her alive." Naruto grinned and said, "That's good. Nice job, Rin." Tsunere's response to this was, of course, WH. What? Why are you looking at me like that? And pose number 4. Well, you did a good job, and I was wondering if you were going to continue attacking me. She closed her eyes and averted her gaze, saying, well, it seems like my plans got spoiled a bit. So that's it for today. Why don't you come over to my house since you look tired after your fight? Meh, I guess so. Why not? Sitting on Rin's couch, Naruto is tending to his minor wounds. He wasn't particularly hurt this time while Rin prepares tea. So Rin, about this master at school, do you have an idea of who it is? Although I haven't been able to identify her yet, I can tell that she is a pretty vicious person because she is prepared to sacrifice every student at the school in order to give her servant more authority. I thought something like this might be a possibility, especially when I felt that barrier. I just didn't think a student would be willing to do so. Naruto grimaced as he finished dressing his wounds. Yes, but it doesn't seem like it's complete though, but once it's activated everyone within it will die of decrepitude. I'm not planning on letting mass murderer slide. Neither am I. I'll prevent the barrier from activating. Actually, that's the reason I was exploring the campus. Oh, that explains why you arrived so late. At the end, Naruto smiled sheepishly and said, I admit it's a better reason than mine. Yes, essentially. However, I lost my temper when I saw a carefree master wandering aimlessly. He thought to himself, I'll say. After taking a sip of her tea, she concluded, and that ended up being a digression. He scratched the back of his head in shame. Sorry, he said. Anyway, I would like to make a proposal. Oh? Naruto raised an eyebrow as he spoke. Then, with a smile, Rin said, I would like to propose a truce. A ceasefire? With a raised eyebrow, Naruto asked. We were revealed as masters following today's incident, right? Before I take care of you, I would like to take care of the vicious master at the school, Rin said, setting down her teacup. Why don't we search for that master at school together? She concluded. I'm not sure if I can trust you though as my ally, no matter how temporary it is. Naruto looked gravely back. You did just attack me out of the blue. I didn't say I was going to be your ally, I'm just arranging a truce until I destroy the force field at school, she replied. Well, so much for my enemy's adversary. Naruto rolled his eyes as he spoke. She said arrogantly, of course. Then, her face softened into a smile, and she added, but I will assist you for the duration of this truce. Provided you don't turn on me. You see, if you're looking for one thing about me, it's that I don't betray my allies. Temporary or not, he retorted with steel in his eyes, causing Rin to slightly widen her eyes in disbelief that he saw her as a comrade. However, I will accept this. I mean, one less person after me. I look forward to, temporarily, working with you, Naruto said, grinning as he stood up and extended his hand. It might be for just a short while, but make yourself useful, okay? She said, assuming the second Tsunere pose, avoiding his gaze to conceal her slight blush. Yeah, I'll do my best, just try to keep up, Naruto said with a playful smile after shaking his head slightly and taking her hand to confirm their truce. We don't want you to encounter any more obstacles, do we? Naturally, Naruto forgot that he was holding a Tsunere's hand, leaving it vulnerable to feminine wrath. What was that? Emiya-kun. With a dark smile and a sickly sweet voice, she asked. Not at all. Didn't I just get lucky when I caught you? Naruto let out a squeak. All right. I thought you said that, she said, releasing his hand with a contented expression. All right. Before he passed away, you received your father's magic crest? She asked casually. Yes, I was able to persuade them, but it did take some. Every time we trained, he appeared hesitant and depressed because he didn't want me to be a magus. Additionally, he remained silent for some time after we gave me his crest. He most likely felt bad about it. Naruto remarked somberly, recalling his adoptive father. I can tell it hurt him to see me in pain as he and an old contact of his that helped us carve it in. She said gravely, I am surprised you are telling me all this, we are only in a temporary truce. Naruto replied with a gentle smile, hey, Dad always did say that magecraft isn't something you should hide so desperately. What? What does that signify? Was he really a... Of course he didn't mean proclaim your status as a magus and use magecraft openly, but be relaxed, don't be so tense about life, don't be bound by conventional rules. Stop talking. Rin yelled angrily. Naruto simply arched an eyebrow in perplexity. Your dad wasn't a magus. And neither is someone like you who was trained by him and uses guns. Standing directly in front of him, she almost yelled. What on earth is wrong with you? What's causing your anger? Who are you to say any of that? She insulted him and his deceased father like it was nothing. Naruto asked in frustration. You have no right to determine whether or not I qualify as a magus because you were ignorant of our past. That's not the point. Then, as though recalling something, she trailed off. What I can't forgive is, I suppose something came over me. No, you're going to tell me what upset you so much that you insulted not just me but also my father, who passed away. Why are you unable to forgive Rin? Naruto gave a firm reply. A moment later, she turned to him and whispered, magic is not something that belongs to a magus. It is the outcome that is passed down from generation to generation, from parent to child. But, your father. It's the magus's responsibility to pass it on to their child, she said, glancing up at Naruto. Wished to forego that obligation. Such an act is beyond my forgiveness. Instead of becoming a magus, your father desired to be a parent. Rin. Naruto trailed off uncertainly. She must be jealous to some extent. Her father probably treated her like an apprentice or a tool rather than a daughter like she wanted, Naruto surmised. If that were the case, he could understand why his circumstances infuriated her. I apologize. Nothing will change if I tell you this. No, everything is all right. I believe I understand, but I won't try to console you or offer sympathy because I know you'll just become irate. You are a better magus than me, Rin, Naruto said with a warm smile that caused her to blush and turn away. However, when he added, but I am the better fighter. Her red-faced, indignant expression made Naruto laugh, but before she could respond, the grandfather clock chimed, signaling the time. After calming down his laughter, Naruto grinned at Rin and said, well, I better head on home. Then we'll exchange information regarding the search for this master at school from now on, she said professionally after taking a deep breath of her own. Let's have lunch on the rooftop at noon. Sounds good to me. Then, turning to her side, Rin yelled, Archer. He appeared at Rin's side, wearing archaic Greek armor, which is essentially a tunic layered with hardened leather and plated with bronze, but he also wore armored greaves to complete the look. He has blue eyes and long, dirty blonde hair that falls down to the back of his thighs, part of which frames his face resting on his shoulders. He also has his black bow behind his back with his quiver, and he wears Greek sandals. He smiles amiably and appears to be very calm and gentle. Why don't you guard Emiya-kun on his return since we will be partners for some time? Please don't attack him. Rin gives the order. The archer. Class servant bowed and said, as you wish, master. Well, this is far enough. You didn't have to accompany me. Naruto concluded jokingly, I was fine on my own, but thank Rin anyhow. It's nice that she was so worried about me. Yes, I had intended to do so, but master's orders and all that. The servant archer answered casually, his soft smile still intact. I'll make sure to tell her you said that in a teasing way as well. She gets flustered too easily. Naruto shot back, grinning, oh I hope you won't, if you do she will blow up on me tomorrow. I wish my students had your attitude, the Greek warrior said with a laugh. They were too narrow-minded and it cost them if they had a just goal. They were always after glory or some other self-serving objective. Even though they went on to become great heroes, their achievements were always tainted by a moment of hubris. And just what attitude do I have? This servant was a hero worthy enough to be recognized by the Grail, Naruto inquired, taking the compliments for what they were. Such praises are unique. From what I have seen and heard, you can be calm, peaceful, and even joking just a moment ago, but when pushed enough, you become fierce and unrelenting. Archer paused before adding, you really live up to your namesake, Maelstrom, while maintaining his soft smile. If I have to fight, I will. The man's smile twitched slightly, but Naruto missed it. I just want to end this stupid selfish war. Without sacrificing anything, without killing anyone? Archer nudged. I'm too smart to believe that none of that will occur. I have previously made sacrifices and killed. With steel in his eyes, Naruto shot back, saying, I will gladly dirty my hands with blood if it means that innocence will be kept out of the crossfire. All right. However, I'm intrigued because, based on what I understand, you didn't use a command spell to call forth Saber during your battle with that servant, who was most likely Rider. You can't compete with a heroic spirit, even though you're stronger and more competent than the majority of magus and masters. Their phantasms are noble. Thus, how come you didn't call Saber? With sincere interest, Archer inquired. With a sigh, Naruto answered, would you believe me if I said I wasn't fighting full power? He went on, you heroic spirits have your secret noble phantasms, and I have my secrets as well, in response to the raised eyebrow he received. I saw that fight as an opportunity to learn more. Saber didn't have to do that for me. Archer laughed again before turning to go, but not before saying a few final words. Saber is very fortunate to have a master like you. With your combined strengths, I have no doubt that you too will succeed. Uzumaki Naruto, I'm interested to see what direction you decide to go." Naruto was left to reflect on the conversation as he made his way home after the Greek archer vanished from view. Knowing that he had arrived home later than he should have, Naruto went to check on Saber, who was sleeping in her futon, and was about to shut the door when she said calmly, "Naruto, you were out very late." "Yeah, things came up at school that I will tell you about tomorrow morning," Naruto said, scratching the back of his head sheepishly. "I apologize if I upset you." "Naruto, I'm glad you were unharmed," was Saber's quiet response. Naruto gave her a gentle smile as she fell back asleep, closed her door, and made the decision to meditate for a while on his backyard porch before turning in for the night. But Archer's words kept coming back to him. What did he mean? The path I choose to take? Was he trying to warn me of something? Perhaps his previous life would have an answer, but Naruto decided he wasn't in the mood to meditate at the moment, so he tried sleeping instead. Unfortunately, Naruto's previous life offered no guidance for his predicament. Instead, he experienced a dreamless sleep for the first time in more than a month. He was a little irritated that he couldn't see a dream when he wanted to, and he even attempted to go back to sleep in the morning to see if he could cause one. But all he received in return was an angry Taiga berating him for trying to sleep in on a school day. Thus, we find Naruto at the breakfast table, which Sakura has once again set up, complaining to himself as he chews his food. Sakura and Taiga made quiet sounds of amazement that distracted him from his irritation. "How many bowls has Saber-chan had thus far, Sakura-chan?" With discomfort, Taiga asked. Sakura smiled back, equally uneasy. This is her fourth. When a bowl was brought into her line of sight, she looked up to see Saber's stoic face and heard him say, "Another, please." Sakura burst out of her awe and exclaimed, "Eh? Ah?" Naruto suppressed a laugh at the expression on her face. Immediately. Then she filled another bowl for her. While those two were busy, Taiga said, "Hey," to Naruto in a whisper. When she got his attention, she went on, "Did something happen yesterday?" Naruto gave a casual response, "Nothing really." Then a grin appeared on his face and he went on, "By the way, Taiga.nay, you should hurry up." "Well, it's just after 7 o'clock. With a growing smirk, Naruto cut her off. "No, while I am proud of you that you remembered the time, I meant something else," he concluded, pointing to the table. The plates and bowls of food were empty except for scraps, and Taiga gasped in horror as he followed his hand with a tick mark for his shot at her poor time management. "Thank you for the meal," she said stoically with a small bow, looking up at the culprit who had just put down her chopsticks elegantly. At that moment, Taiga lost it and cried out in shock and grief, "Ah! My pot Nattou, completely gone." Naturally, Naruto was flushed and trying not to laugh because Saber simply dismissed everything by getting up and saying, "Please, excuse me." Taiga, meanwhile, kept crying. How could she? "I am unable to continue. My energy source." Sakura asked Naruto, "What happened?" while ignoring the sobbing to his right. Sakura blushed a little as Naruto simply looked up at her and said, "Well, she was worried that I was out late last night and I didn't call her. She protects me. She was simply upset that if I had been injured, her job might have gone wrong. That's probably the reason behind the cold shoulder." "I see," she said, her expression thoughtful. Actually, earlier, Saber had intercepted Naruto on his way to the breakfast table and drew him aside for a conversation. "She was constantly attacking me with her superior speed, and as I mentioned earlier, there was nothing I could do. I'm sure she would have taken advantage of the opportunity to strike me down if I had paused to concentrate and call for your help. Furthermore, I didn't go all out, she didn't use her noble phantasm, and neither of us was using our full power. In that battle, we were both attempting to learn more about the adversary," Naruto countered. "I was able to learn that she doesn't really like her master and that he is either incompetent or weak. They're also responsible for the blatantly offensive wall that encloses the school," Naruto concluded with a furious sulk. "In any case, you should have called me. There would have been more that we could have done together than alone," Saber said, her eye just twitching. "I wish you had asked me first, even for this brief collaboration with Rin." "You oppose it? Why?" Naruto asked, perplexed. "No, instead, I agree with your choice because Rin will be able to teach you things you don't currently know. But at first, we had to battle Rin as an adversary. You should exercise caution when interacting with her," she firmly retorted. "I am aware of everything. This is a temporary truce because we got into a fight earlier in the day and I know to be cautious around her. However, I get the impression that she is a decent person who won't turn on us until we both agree that the truce is over." It was so annoying to have such an unconventional master, and as Naruto finished, Saber could only look into his eyes, searching for any flaw in his judgment, but instead she sighed and got up to go to the breakfast table. Naruto turned to face the source when he heard a soft voice say, "Senpai." "Well, I won't have morning practice during this time because the archery club won't be meeting for a while. So, if you don't mind, can we go to school together?" Sakura asked, nervously fiddling with the apron beneath the table. "Yeah, sounds like a plan, Sakura-chan," Naruto said with a knowing smile. "Let's start by tidying up the mess those two left behind." "All right." She smiled more assuredly in response. Sakura pauses as Naruto and Sakura put on their shoes to head out. "Well, Sakura-chan, what's wrong?" she mumbles, and gestures toward the source. Which, coincidentally, was Saber directly behind Naruto, who naturally looks at her bewilderedly as she puts on her shoes. "Are you going to follow me around all day?" Naruto inquired wearily. "Obviously. It is my responsibility to keep you safe, Naruto," she says with her typical stoic demeanor as she opens the door, only to discover. "Rin?" Naruto inquired. "I knew this would happen," she says coolly, glancing slyly at everyone while wearing her typical school uniform. "I don't mean to be impolite, but why are you here?" Naruto, who is aware that she is doing this to irritate him, asked, raising an eyebrow. Sakura trailed off in a startled tone, "Tasaka, senpai." She muttered in surprise, "Ah, Sakura," before gathering herself and giving her a sidelong glance. "Oh, yeah, the archery club isn't meeting today," she said. Uncertain of her purpose, Sakura inquired, "Why are you?" As she strode forward, she proudly declared, "Well, I've decided to go to school with Emiya-kun starting today." She concluded by naively asking, "You didn't hear about it?" They both turned to face Naruto, whose eye twitched even more at the sight of Sakura's sorrowful gaze and Rin's wink. He smiled when he saw Rin's eyes start to twitch dangerously and Sakura light up with joy, but he chose to exact a small revenge by saying, "No Rin, I don't remember agreeing to that. Besides, I promised Sakura-chan I would walk with her to school." Darkly, Rin muttered, "Emiya-kun. I can meet up with you during lunch at noon, right? Let's meet up at the roof." Rin simply mumbled angrily to herself before nodding and letting out a sigh, saying, "I suppose that is fine, I'll see you later, Sakura, Emiya-kun." She was already out the door when Saber's voice asked, "What are you doing?" Naruto insisted, "Oi, Saber, give me a minute." Rin simply sighed and shook her head before whispering to Naruto, "You should have predicted this would have happened when you came home last night. Consider matters more carefully." She left him, Sakura, and Saber alone as she left. "Well?" asked an impatient Saber. "Saber, I know you want to go with me, but that is just asking for trouble to appear. Besides," here's what he said to her as he leaned forward, "I can take of myself, and I promise if things get to the point where I can't handle it, I will summon you." She responded harshly in a whisper, "Even though that is what you said last time." Naruto merely let out a sigh. He disliked using this power. It was deceptive and unfair. Naruto dislikes employing such a deceptive tactic on his family members and close friends. But his hand is being forced by Saber. He made the decision to use a tried and true approach that has been successful for him with women all over the world. He inhaled deeply, lowered his gaze, and then abruptly raised his head to face Saber. Saber's breath caught in her throat as she turned to face Naruto again. As he clasped his hands together in a pleading manner and whimpered a long, "Please," with his whisker marks, it appeared as though you had just kicked a fox kit. His blue eyes were now greatly widened and filled with unshed tears, and his lips were quivering in a pitiful pout. Or, to Saber, a tiny, adorable lion. He even had the whiskers and golden mane to match. Sakura wanted to glomp and squeal so badly that she had to turn away and bite her lip to stop herself. In an attempt to conceal her blush and maintain her royal dignity, Saber mumbled, "Fine. But, make sure you come home before dark this time." Sakura and Saber both sighed with relief as Naruto returned to normal right away. "Thanks for trusting me, Saber. I'll see you later," Naruto exclaimed as he broke the embrace and waved as he hurried to Saber's side and lifted her into the air. Sakura simply bowed her head and followed him. Saber simply stood there in a daze, repeatedly reliving the events. With a slight smile on her face, she finally got over it, muttered to herself, and walked to the dojo about obstinate and annoying masters. Sakura and Naruto were strolling along the same path they usually took to get to school. Sakura was a little anxious, but she was relieved that she had the guts to ask her crush to accompany her to school. They could now be by themselves. Together. Sakura tried to push down her blush, but Naruto might look at her, so she had to turn her head away to conceal it. On the outside, Naruto appeared at ease, but he was actually concerned about the state of his alliance with Saber. He had broken his promise, which had disappointed and infuriated her. It is expected of Naruto to keep his word. Will you keep your word when that's all anyone has left to go by? He has always made an effort to honor his commitments in both his previous and current lives, but now. The walk was becoming too quiet for Naruto, so he simply shook his head lightly to shake off the negative thoughts and turned to Sakura. So Sakura-chan, Naruto said sheepishly, scratching his cheek, after gaining her attention. I apologize for having you make breakfast every day lately. However, Sakura simply responded with a gentle smile, saying, It's alright, I like cooking for you senpai. It makes me happy. Ha! What am I gonna do with you Sakura-chan, what will our classmates think? We're acting like a married couple. Naruto concluded with a subtly playful grin. It only widened when she blushed and stammered. TTTH. That, she said, pausing in embarrassment when she heard a suppressed laugh that seemed ready to explode. The source, in her opinion, was Naruto's inability to contain his laughter. Sakura naturally complained, Senpai, since he was walking ahead of her this time and she had already begun to slow down from the shock and embarrassment of what he was saying, he didn't notice the growing effect of his words on her. Sorry Sakura-chan. I just can't help it. You're just way too much fun to tease. You always look so cute when you blush and stutter like that. She was blushing more intensely than before. I mean I'm being serious. You keep cooking for me like that, I might just fall for you, said Naruto. He heard a dull thud from behind him at that moment. When Naruto turned around, he saw a red-faced Sakura from head to neck, steam leaking from her ears as she took in what Naruto had said. Despite having closed her eyes due to fainting, she continued to mutter, Senpai, Naruto. Senpai, falling for me, with a broad, silly smile. When Naruto saw the scene from his previous life, he simply started to perspire. Sakura and Hinata were quite alike. He laughed as he picked her up in bridal fashion and continued to walk to school. I hope no rumors come of this. Naruto had to roll his eyes at the whispering that followed him out of the school nurse's office. It appears that his carrying Sakura to school sparked more than a few rumors. He had left Sakura a note expressing regret for making fun of her excessively, wishing her well, and concluding with a little afterthought. You look cute when you're sleeping. It was really addictive to make fun of Sakura. However, he was thinking about the barrier he encountered as soon as he stepped onto school property. It was still not subtle, but it was growing stronger. The master is either a very cruel person or simply not very intelligent. Really, to feed your servant, take out a whole school? Wasn't the war meant to be a secret? Before Naruto knew it, it was time to meet Rin on the rooftop. The remainder of the day passed quickly. He noticed Sakura going down the same flight of stairs as he was climbing them. Oh, hey Sakura-chan, you look like you are feeling better, Naruto grinned. Sakura said, Thank you for taking care of me senpai. She blushed slightly at her actions and fainting earlier in the morning, and at that moment, she thought the hem of her skirt was really intriguing. As he continued to ascend the stairs, Naruto grinned and said, Oh, it's no problem, I always take care of my precious people. Well, I'll see you later, Sakura-chan. Sakura, however, remained motionless in disbelief. People, are they precious? In her mind, she repeated. She jolted out of it with a small shake of her head, but she was beaming for the remainder of the day as she descended the stairs. Naruto glanced around to check if Rin had arrived as he opened the rooftop door. After a few seconds he spotted her leaning against the fence with her arms crossed and eyes closed. Naruto walked towards her and said nonchalantly, Well, this morning was messy, wasn't it? He finished as he leaned against the fence next to her. Rin's eyebrow began to twitch as she said, I was trying to talk to you about our truce and you sent me away? Naruto just looked at her out of the corner of his eye and said, Well, what you were about to do to Sakura-chan wasn't gonna be nice, and I just prevented it. Besides, she asked. First, Naruto finished in a sing-song manner while waving his finger back and forth. Naruto grinned and said, And I know you were trying to pull that whole drama to get back at me for beating you last night. Rin sighed. After blushing angrily and coughing to regain her composure, Rin said gravely, I'll begin with the gravest issue first. Naruto also lost his smile and appeared serious. Earlier, the school was informed that they have found Ayako. She's alive, but no matter how much they called to her, she wouldn't respond. They diagnosed her as being in toxic shock in the hospital, but it is probably. Naruto interrupted solemnly, a servant. Rin replied, A master must have ordered the assault. And once this barrier is activated, it will dissolve and suck out the soul of every human inside the barrier. A very diabolical act. It's a plan to charge up the servant using various means. Yeah, and the servant is most likely the one I fought last night, Naruto replied. Rider. asked Rin. From what you told me of the special traits of each servant, and what I can tell of her skills and blinding speed when she wants to use it, yeah. Of course we don't have any concrete evidence, replied Naruto. Of course. Anyway, all we can do is delay the activation of the barrier and possibly disrupt it completely. I guess so. With a hand on her hip and a slight smirk, Rin concluded, since the barrier was made by a servant, it should be very difficult, if not impossible, to destroy it. Therefore, we should concentrate on destroying the spell marks and delaying the activation. It will be an endless cycle though, since they will just replace each other, said Naruto. Rin frowned and said, I know, but it is all we can do right now. Well, we can get started now. What do you mean? Inquired Rin. Naruto knelt down and revealed a spell mark a few feet away from them, saying, well, I can feel one right here. Rin knelt down and put her hand on it, muttering, it shouldn't be this easy. The spell mark broke and disappeared as she chanted, execute medium. Power disenchant, in German. Well, that's one. Rin paused, then looked up and grinned at Naruto, saying, it's getting interesting, no? You seem to have a talent for finding these. After school, will you stay, Emiya-kun? We might be able to scare this master. Then I ought to bring Saber, I did make a promise. Rin interrupted him, saying, don't worry, I'm here. Archer is here in spiritual form, and you are strong yourself. In any case, one more couldn't hurt, and I'm a man of my word, Naruto remarked, shaking his head. When school lets out, I'll give her a call and invite her to come and be here. Rin simply sighed in response, but when she saw him take out a cell phone, it became a squeak of outrage. Phones are not allowed in schools. With a deadpan expression, Naruto addressed her, saying, so? Ignoring Rin's spluttering, Naruto dialed his home number and waited for Saber to answer. He didn't have to wait long before he heard her stoic, hello? Hi, Saber, it's me, Naruto? Is there a problem? No, everything is all right. He could see that she had already changed into her armor. Look, I just need you to be here so you can assist Rin and me with something after school. I thought having you here would be fair, he said. After a moment of silence, Naruto heard, I see. What do you need, master? We are going to be destroying the spell marks around our school for the barrier that has been erected around it, Naruto responded, groaning. We believe it will be used to drain the souls of all those inside in order to feed the offending servant. I assumed you would want to join. Obviously. A knight and a king have a responsibility to protect the weak and defenseless. With pride and a hint of rage at the barrier's intent, she responded royally, I will be there shortly. Just as the bell rang, he hung up the phone and said, good, I'll see you then. Well, let's head back to class, Rin said with a sigh as she started to walk away. After school, I'll see you. As he started to leave himself, Naruto simply waved at her, saying, yeah, see ya. As the sun started to set, we saw Naruto and an irritated Rin making their way to Saber, who was waiting at the school gate. Although she was dressed in her civilian, public attire at the time, she was prepared to change into her armor and sword at the first sign of trouble, as she always is. Hi, Saber, called Naruto, waving and grinning. She nodded back, Naruto. Should we begin? All right, come on, an enthusiastic Naruto exclaimed, making Rin laugh and shake her head, while Saber continued to walk stoically. The master and the servant would have to waste their time creating new spell marks after an hour of destroying all the ones they could find, some more amusing than others, such as inside the boys' restroom or on the ceiling, and an accidental panty showed a thank God Rin or Saber didn't notice. So, are there any others? Rin asked. When Saber shook her head, Naruto turned to face her and said, none that me or Saber can detect. I understand. This ought to be sufficient, though. This person will undoubtedly take action because he probably didn't anticipate that so many spell marks would be destroyed in a single day, Rin said. Saber interrupted, and that is when we strike. That's right. Rin confirmed. Then, with a rather sly smile on her face, Rin said, come on out now. I'll make up for the guilt you feel for making me put in so much effort. Naruto whimpered in his head, scary, but he shrugged off his fear of feminine rage and pulled out 3 drinks from his pack. Here, both of you have a drink. It'll help you relax a bit. And hopefully get rid of that scary smirk on your face, Rin, he added mentally. HMPH. Though you don't show it, you're actually quite thoughtful, she said, smiling mischievously as she accepted the drink. Saber nodded and said, thank you, Naruto. Why can't you praise me or at least thank me sincerely like Saber? Naruto deadpanned at Rin. However, the next time you're buying drinks, get me some milk and tea. I will be less grateful for anything else. Take note, she said, maintaining the same cunning grin. With a sigh, Naruto leaned against the wall beside Saber, who was sipping her drink and watching for trouble. He then grinned and said, yeah, I got you. However. What? Rin inquired. I just wondered how all of your fans would respond if they witnessed their idol behave in such a manner at this moment. As everyone learns about your crafty side, it would be entertaining to watch, he teased. Everyone else is to blame for their naivete. Furthermore, a magus has a great responsibility to conceal their true identity. She finished flipping him around. I mean, how would your fangirls feel if they saw what you really do? She asked. With a slight blanch, Naruto nodded and said, true, you got me there. After a brief period of silence during which Saber remained watchful, Rin said, and I am the successor of the Tasaka family. I must be the perfect, superior student. Otherwise, in heaven, I won't be able to see my deceased father. Heaven? When I was young, he passed away. He lived long enough. And passed away naturally, so I'm not depressed at all. Because we are magi, she concluded, her expression stoic. After taking a sip of his own beverage, Naruto sneered and remarked, considering all of your acting prowess, you are a pretty bad liar. Anybody would be saddened by the death of someone they knew, especially if they were family or close friends. Don't use your status as a magus as a cover up or an excuse. After giving Naruto a quick glance, Rin sighed and nodded, saying, you're right, so right, I can't refute it. We should go home soon. Yeah, come on Saber. Rin said, see you tomorrow then. Yes, see you, Rin. Naruto waved Saber over and said, come on, Saber. Emiya.kun. Rin called, and Naruto heard it. Yes? Go home as soon as possible, and don't stray on the way, okay? She smiled as she spoke. Oh, Rin. Are you now concerned about me? I'm moved. With a dramatic hand over his heart, Naruto gave a playful response. No. We are now partners. My plans will be ruined if you leave without telling me. That's it. She gave an angry yelp. I understand. With a wise nod, Naruto remarked, it would ruin your plans to seduce me. Oh. You are not possible. Why, goodbye. She walked out huffing and blushing like a very embarrassed tsundere. Naruto turned to go with Saber at his side, grinning amusedly as he watched her go. Why do you like making fun of her, master? With a head tilt, Saber asked, and Naruto thought it was adorable. Well, it's not only her. But, first of all, it's entertaining, and second, Rin is constantly stiff or dignified. People should unwind, you know. The master and servant appeared to be aware of what they were doing and were simply waiting for them to be alone. It was the same feeling as the other spell marks, but much more potent. Neither of them said anything, just nodded to each other as they went to look into the source. Naruto and Saber both paused in their steps. They discovered that it was coming from the archery club room, which made sense to Naruto because Ayako was the first victim in the club president. They went inside and searched the dimly lit room for any enemies, while Naruto had his holster with all of his equipment on and his hands hovering over his weapons, ready to draw them. Naruto saw it then. A huge spell mark that was not even concealed covered the majority of the wall on the far side of the room. While I destroy it, Saber cover me, yes. Despite the initial backlash, Naruto continued to mutter the enchantments to destroy it. Just as he was about to finish, he stopped, causing Saber to tense up and prepare her sword. He turned to face the newcomer and said, Rider. That must be your class. She didn't even acknowledge the two for a brief moment in the doorway before nodding to him. She respected him for the same reasons she should hate Hima. He was competent, unlike her master. Despite his unconventional methods and driving her away in a fight. Emiya. How are you doing? A very haughty and conceited voice said. Shinji, still a smug bitch I see, Naruto sighed, before he composed himself and said, there is no need to fight, let's call off our servants. Shinji's eye twitched. Naruto firmly interrupted, saying, you'll pardon me if I don't want to believe you, so no, I think Saber will stay with me. With the same arrogant smirk, he said, that's fine, continuing the conversation. We can all get acquainted at my place.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.